Hello everyone and welcome back to the Unexplained Diaries. Here on this channel I share real-life encounters with beings from beyond the skies to help you unwind and drift off to sleep. Before we dive in, I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and let's begin. I was hunting mule deer up near the Tavaputs Plateau last October. Northern Utah, real remote area. I usually go solo, but that weekend my cousin Tyler was supposed to come with. He bailed last minute, something with his kids' school, so I ended up heading out alone. It's not unusual for me. I've done it before. Weather was perfect for it. Cold mornings, clear skies, no fresh snow yet. I set up camp just off a service trail a few miles past where the Forest Service gates off the road. There's an old logging access point I use that's barely visible unless you know where to look. I hiked in Friday evening, pitched my tent, and glassed the ridge a bit before sunset. Nothing exciting that night. I turned in early. Next morning I was up before 5, had coffee over the little stove, and was hiking northeast by first light. The land there is a mix of rocky slopes, pine stands, and little clearings. Good country. Around 7:30 I crossed a small frozen creek and took a narrow game trail that curved up along a ridge. About a quarter mile in, I noticed something weird off to my left, maybe 50 yards down the slope. It looked like a reflection. Not sunlight on snow or ice. This was bright and constant, like metal. I assumed it was trash at first, maybe some idiot left behind a hubcap or a busted cooler. But when I got closer, it was clear this wasn't garbage. There was a sphere, perfectly round, maybe 3 feet in diameter, half buried in the ground at the base of a small rock outcrop. The surface was silver, but not like polished chrome, more like brushed aluminum. Smooth, no seams, no dents or scratches, just there. The weirdest part was the ground around it. The dirt looked undisturbed. No drag marks, no broken branches, no footprints. Not mine, not anyone else's. There was frost on the leaves and the grass nearby, but none on the sphere. It wasn't even cold to the touch. I reached out and laid my hand on it. Warm, not hot. Warmer than the air, anyway. I crouched down, looked for markings. Nothing. No writing, no lights, no indication of what it was. Just this metal orb sitting where it shouldn't be. I spent maybe 15 minutes just circling it, trying to make sense of how it got there. No sign of impact, no crater. It hadn't fallen from above. It looked placed. I thought about trying to move it, but it was lodged too deep in the soil. I nudged it with the toe of my boot. It didn't budge. After a while, I started to feel strange. Not sick, just watched. Like the air around it was heavier, if that makes sense. There were no birds, no wind. My ears felt kind of stuffed, like when you drive up a mountain too fast. I took out my phone to get a picture, and the camera app wouldn't open. I restarted it, but the screen stayed black when I tried again. I checked my GPS app next, and it froze completely. Battery dropped from 76% zero while I watched. Dead. Just like that. I carry a backup battery pack. It didn't work either. I even pulled out my little Garmin unit, which always works out there. It wouldn't boot up. No screen. I remember thinking it must have been a solar flare or something, though I've never had gear act like that before. After standing there for too long trying to figure it out, I decided to head back. I marked the spot in my mind. Big split pine just up the ridge, rocky outcrop to the west, frost-patched clearing. It wasn't far from camp. Maybe a mile and a half. Back at my tent, everything worked fine. Phone turned on, GPS reset, no issues. I even took a picture of the stove to make sure the camera was okay. I thought maybe I'd just hit some weird dead zone, though I'd never run into one like that before. That night I didn't sleep great, kept waking up and listening. It was dead quiet. No wind, no critters, not even the usual rustling in the brush. The woods just felt paused. I woke up early again Sunday and decided to check the sphere one more time before heading home. I wanted to take a real photo, maybe try digging around it a bit more. When I got back to the spot, it was gone. The clearing was still there. The rock outcrop, the pine, the frost, everything where it should be. But the sphere was just not there anymore. No hole, no tracks, no signs it had ever been there at all. The dirt wasn't disturbed. There was even undisturbed frost right where the base of the sphere had been. It looked like nothing had touched that spot in days. I walked in circles for a while, convinced I was in the wrong place, but I wasn't. I checked the landmarks again and again. Same ridge, same split pine, same angle of the sun. I knew where I was. I just didn't know what had changed. I packed up camp before noon and hiked out faster than usual. Didn't eat breakfast, didn't even make coffee. I kept checking behind me like something was going to step out of the woods. Once I got back to the truck, I drove into Vernal and stayed at a cheap motel. I didn't want to sleep out there again. Since then, I've told exactly 2 people, Tyler and a friend I've hunted with a few times. Neither believed me. Can't blame them. If someone told me this story, I'd probably think they were full of it too. But I know what I saw. I touched it. I still think about how it felt under my hand. Smooth, warm metal in freezing air, like it was waiting for something. I started the podcast almost 2 years ago, mostly as a side project. My name's Jamie Torres. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and I've always been into weird stories, especially the kind people write off as conspiracy or urban legend. Nothing crazy, just local mysteries, odd disappearances, things that don't quite add up. Last month, I put out an episode about a UFO sighting from the 1970s that's been unsolved and mostly forgotten. The guy who reported it, a trucker named Walt, claimed he saw some strange lights hovering over a stretch of highway near Cherokee, then lost time. The official records are thin, and most locals treat it like a campfire tale. But I found some old audio interviews and pieced it together. The episode got more listens than anything I'd done before. The day after it dropped, I started getting weird voicemails on my podcast number. At first, they were just static bursts, the kind you get with a bad connection. Then, after a few days, the static started breaking up, and I could hear something else underneath. A deep, distorted voice repeating the phrase, "Turn back the signal," over and over. No name, no message, just those words. I thought it was a prank at first. I mean, who would do that? But the voicemails kept coming, almost daily. Always at night, always that same phrase. Sometimes the static would flare up so loud it rattled my phone. I tried to block the number, but it just kept changing. No caller ID, no trace. I told some friends, and they laughed it off. Part of the spooky podcast hype, or maybe just some troll having fun. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then, about a week after the episode went live, I woke up one morning to find all my recording gear gone. Every mic, every recorder, the mixer, headphones, everything I used to make the podcast was just disappeared. I live alone on the edge of town, so I don't have housemates or anyone else with easy access. I checked every window and door. Nothing was broken or forced. It was like someone had a key and knew exactly what to take. What freaked me out more was what I found outside my front door. Sitting there on the welcome mat was a single microphone, one of the old handheld mics I use for interviews. It wasn't just left there casually. It was placed carefully, right in the center. When I picked it up, I noticed something carved into the metal body near the base. Just one word: silence. I'm not exactly sure how I didn't lose it at that moment. I mean, it felt like a line had been crossed, but not in any way I was prepared for. I called the police, but they shrugged it off as a burglary with a weird message. They couldn't explain the missing stuff or the mic on the doorstep, and they didn't find any signs of forced entry. After that, the voicemails stopped, but I wasn't any less paranoid. I was watching the shadows in my apartment, double-checking locks, jumping at every noise. I shut down the podcast for a while, deleted the episode about Walt, hoping that would stop whatever was happening. But something else started. Sometimes when I tried to record just ambient sounds or anything normal, the playback would have static or low whispers layered underneath. Nothing clear, but always there. I even tried wiping my phone and computer, reinstalling everything, but the interference persisted. The silence in the room felt heavier, like it was watching me. Last night, I heard a knock at the door around midnight. It was soft, deliberate. When I looked through the peephole, no one was there. I opened it anyway and found a small, worn cassette tape sitting on the porch light ledge. No label, no writing. I brought it inside and played it on my old tape player. It was mostly silence, except for a low, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat. After a minute, the voice came through, clearer than before. That same deep voice, calm but chilling. Turn back the signal. I turned it off, heart pounding. I'm back here now, writing this, trying to make sense of it all. The gear is still gone. The voice keeps coming in bursts of static on my phone. And that mic, silence, still sits on my desk, cold to the touch. I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. We were camped out near Black Mesa, just west of the Colorado-New Mexico border. It was the end of September, still warm during the day, but it dropped hard at night. No cell reception out there, barely any light pollution. Perfect spot to camp and stargaze. There were 5 of us. Me, my cousin Nathan, his girlfriend Emily, and 2 of our friends, Felix and Dan. We had 3 tents between us and a fire pit made from a ring of scavenged rocks. Nothing fancy. We'd hiked maybe 3 miles off a dirt access road with our gear in packs. The plan was 2 nights, just to get away from everything. First day and night were normal. We hiked a bit, made some dinner on the fire, drank cheap beer, passed around a little weed. Around 10 or so, we laid out on the rocks and watched the sky for a while. Nathan's into astronomy. He pointed out Saturn and a few constellations. I had my Casio watch set to atomic time, synced it before we left town. Nathan and Emily both had digital watches too, so we checked them all that first night, just out of habit. They were identical to the second. I turned in around midnight, I think. The others stayed up a bit longer. My tent was solo, just me and my sleeping bag on a foam pad. I remember waking up cold around 2:30 and pulling my hoodie over my face. Nothing weird. Desert nights are freezing. The next thing I remember is waking up with this intense pressure behind my eyes and blood on my upper lip. I sat up, wiped at my nose, and it came away red. Not gushing, just that slow kind of nosebleed you get from dry air. Except it didn't feel like a normal one. It burned, and there was this taste, kind of metallic but different, like ozone or something. Hard to explain. I stepped outside to get some water and noticed the air was absolutely still, like unnaturally still. No bugs, no wind, just silent. The sky was that dead black scattered with stars, but I couldn't find the Big Dipper. That stuck with me. I remember looking for it automatically, and it just wasn't there. When I turned on my watch backlight to check the time, it said 6:12 a.m. I stared at it for a while, then looked up. The sky didn't match. It still looked like it was the middle of the night. The others were still asleep. No movement in any of the tents. I walked over to the fire pit, just cold ash and the faintest glow under a few coals. No signs anyone else was awake. I went back to my tent and got my phone from my backpack just to double check, but it wouldn't turn on. Dead battery. Same for my backup flashlight. I know for a fact it was charged before we left. I just stood there for a while, nose still bleeding a bit, trying to make sense of it. I felt off, physically, like jet lag or maybe altitude sickness, even though we weren't that high. My balance was weird too, like the ground had a slight tilt to it. Every time I shifted my weight, I had to catch myself a little. At some point, I went and sat on a rock, maybe 10 feet from camp, and just waited. The sun didn't start coming up until around 5:50 by the other watches. Mine still said it was past 6:30 by then. When everyone else started stirring, I didn't say anything at first. Just watched them. Emily was the first to ask what time it was. Nathan looked at his and said 6:04. I looked at mine and it said 6:45. "Your watch is fast," he said. "No," I told him. "It was synced last night." He kind of shrugged it off, but I pressed the button to show the sync screen. It still said it had successfully updated the time before we left. There's no signal out there, so it wouldn't have changed on its own. Nathan figured I must have bumped something or hit the wrong button while I slept. But I've worn that watch for years. I know how it works. It doesn't just shift forward 41 minutes on its own. I asked if anyone else had weird dreams or anything, but nobody had. Dan said he slept like a rock. Felix complained that his head hurt a little, but figured it was from the whiskey. I finally mentioned the nosebleed and the time thing, and they just kind of shrugged it off. Dry air, too much campfire smoke, stuff like that. But I knew it wasn't that. I've had desert nosebleeds. This felt different. I tried to drop it, but it kept eating at me. The rest of the day was off. Not in any big way, just small stuff. Birds that didn't make noise. A dead rabbit we found that didn't look right somehow. No bugs around it, no smell. That second night, I didn't sleep much. I stayed outside my tent with a headlamp on and my camera set up on a tripod. It has a time-lapse setting, so I ran a sequence from 1 a.m. to 4. I didn't see anything with my own eyes, but the camera snapped something weird. It was a frame at 3C17. The stars are all sharp and still, but there's this faint blur across the middle of the shot, like a smear of light, almost too faint to notice. Just a pale line, perfectly horizontal. It's not a plane trail, not a satellite. No flaring, no direction, just a soft line. The next shot, taken 30 seconds later, it's gone. Sky back to normal. I showed Nathan the photo the next morning, but he thought it was a lens flare. I didn't argue, just tucked up my gear and helped break camp. When we got back to the cars, I synced my watch again using the app on my phone. It jumped back exactly 41 minutes. Not 40, not 42. 41. I've never figured that part out. I was about halfway through Nevada when it happened. Just past Tonopah, headed east on 6 toward Ely. Nothing but desert and sagebrush and that kind of empty silence that gets into your head after a few hours. I'd left Bishop that morning, took my time through the hills, stopped at a couple of ghost towns along the way. I wasn't in a rush, just me, my Tacoma, and the open road. It was late, not quite midnight yet. The air was still warm, probably mid-70s, but dry like paper. I had the windows cracked and a podcast going low on the stereo, mostly to keep myself awake. There aren't many cars on that stretch after dark. None, really. I hadn't passed anyone in either direction for at least 45 minutes. I was watching the road like usual when I noticed a red light way off to my left. Just a single point, steady. My first thought was that it was a tower, maybe a radio repeater or some weather station out in the hills. It didn't flash or move, just glowed a dull red like the ones you see blinking on cell towers. But the thing is, there's nothing out there. No towns, no stations, nothing but BLM land and rock. I even slowed down a little, leaned over the wheel, trying to make out the shape of a tower. Couldn't see one. Just that red light, hovering low, maybe 20 or 30 feet above the desert floor. I kept an eye on it as I drove. It didn't get closer or farther away, just stayed level with me, same angle. I figured it must be on a ridge or something, and I was just tracking with it as the road curved. Then it rose, not fast, but smooth, straight up. Like a balloon maybe, or a drone, but perfectly vertical. I watched it go up, maybe a couple 100 feet, then it blinked out. Gone. No fade, no dimming. Just gone. I pulled over without really thinking. Gravel crunched under the tires as I rolled onto the shoulder, left the engine running, sat there with both hands on the wheel, staring out at the black. I didn't feel scared exactly, just off, like I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. I turned off the podcast, rolled down both front windows all the way, just sat in the dark for a minute, listening. Nothing. No wind, no bugs, no distant cars, just silence and heat. I don't know why I got out, but I did. Grabbed my flashlight from the glove box and stepped onto the shoulder. The sky was clear, full of stars. I could see the Milky Way smeared across it like paint. I pointed the flashlight out toward where I'd seen the red light. Nothing but scrub and open flats, maybe some low hills way out. The beam didn't reach far. I didn't go far either. Maybe 10 feet from the truck. It felt wrong to wander out there, like the edge of a pool you don't want to fall into. I just stood there for a bit, trying to shake the weird feeling crawling up my spine. That's when I noticed the static. Not in the air, on the radio. I hadn't touched the dial, but the stereo had gone fuzzy, like it was caught between two stations. Low white noise, barely audible under the hum of the truck's engine. I reached in and turned it off completely. Something about the quiet was worse than the static. I decided to keep moving. Got back in, locked the doors without meaning to, and pulled back onto the road. Told myself it was probably a drone. Some military test. There's a ton of airspace out there used for that stuff. But I couldn't shake the way it moved, how steady it was, how it disappeared. About 10 minutes later, I saw it again. Not to the side this time, straight ahead. A faint red light, low, just above the horizon. It wasn't flashing, it didn't bob like a plane. Just sat there, dead center. At first I thought it might be a brake light from another car cresting a hill, but the road was flat and I never got closer. I drove another mile, still there, unmoving. I slowed to 40, then 30. Still the same size, same position. I even rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe it was just a reflection or something stuck on the windshield. Then it split in two. The single red light became two, side by side, maybe 50 feet apart, both just hovering. Still no blinking, no movement. I came to a complete stop in the middle of the highway, hazard lights clicking, and watched. After a few seconds, the two lights began to move, not toward me, not away, just upward again, together, same speed, same direction. They rose in sync until they were almost level with the stars. Then they blinked out, one after the other. I sat there with my foot on the brake, mouth dry, trying to understand what I'd just seen. No explanation came. No sound. No wind. Nothing. I didn't stop again. I drove the rest of the way to Ely in a kind of daze, white-knuckled on the wheel, constantly checking the rearview mirror. I kept the radio off, kept the windows up. The stars seemed brighter than usual, too bright. The shadows on the road looked wrong, stretched, like the moonlight was bending somehow. I got into town just before 2 a.m., checked into a little motel off the main drag. The girl at the desk asked if I needed anything, and I must have looked off because she asked if I was okay. I just told her I was tired. That night in the motel, I left the curtains open. Didn't sleep much. I kept thinking I'd see those lights again, hovering out past the parking lot, rising above the hills behind the town, but they never came back. We'd started the hike around 10 in the morning. It was supposed to be just a day trip. Me, Jason, Liz, and Mark. We parked off a dirt road outside of Newberry Springs and followed a trail Jason had marked on his GPS. It was barely a path, just old BLM land he said he'd explored once before. Nothing official. No shade, just sun-baked rocks and dry washes winding through low hills. Classic Mojave. We packed light. Just water, jerky, a couple Cliff Bars each. Mark brought a beat-up Nikon and Liz had her little drone. I was just happy to get out of the city for a day. It was hot as hell by noon. No wind, barely any sound besides our boots crunching and the occasional buzzing fly. We'd passed a rusted-out shell of a truck, probably from the 60s, sitting half buried in the sand. Liz took a few pictures. Jason joked that it looked like it had just been dropped there from the sky. By the time we hit the ridge Jason wanted to reach, the sun was dropping low, maybe 5:30. We sat for a bit, shared what was left of the food, and watched the hills go dark. I remember looking at my phone around 6. I had no service, but the GPS was still working. I'd marked our truck on the map and figured we had enough daylight to head back before it got tricky. That's when we saw the light. At first it looked like a star, except too low and too bright. It wasn't blinking like a plane, and it was dead silent, just hovering there, maybe 100 feet up, no shape, just this pale white orb. It didn't flicker, just sat in the sky above the wash. Nobody said anything right away. I think we were all just staring at it, trying to make it fit into something normal. Then it started moving, slow, smooth, like it was gliding without any resistance. It drifted over the ridge, then stopped again. Still no sound, not even the hum you get from a drone or chopper. Liz pulled out her phone to film it, held it up, and cursed. "It's dead," she said. "I had 60% like 20 minutes ago." I checked mine. Screen was black, wouldn't even boot. Jason's too. Mark's camera wouldn't turn on either, even though he'd barely used it. We stood there for another minute, watching this thing hover. It started moving again, faster this time, then blinked out. Just gone. Not behind a cloud, not fading, just there 1 second and gone the next. That's the last thing I remember clearly. The next thing I knew, we were walking, heading downhill. Jason was in front, Liz and Mark behind. I remember thinking it was darker than it should have been, like we'd missed sunset completely. I pulled out my phone again, and this time it lit up. 8:12 p.m., battery back at 47%. The trail on the GPS showed we were way off course, like we'd veered half a mile south without realizing it. I stopped and asked, "Does anyone remember the last hour?" Jason turned around. "What do you mean?" "After the light disappeared," I said. "We didn't start walking right away, did we?" Mark looked confused. "I thought we did." "No," Liz said. "We stood there for a while, didn't we?" Nobody could agree on how long we'd been standing on that ridge. No one remembered packing up or deciding to head back. And none of us remembered the sun going down. We argued about it for a bit, then decided to just keep moving. The truck wasn't far, and none of us liked the idea of being out there any longer than necessary. We made it back just after 9. The air felt heavy, still hot, but with this weird static in it, like before a thunderstorm, except there weren't any clouds. When we got to the truck, the first thing I noticed was that the clock on the dash was blinking. Jason's battery had died, apparently, though the dome light still worked. He swore it had been fine that morning. We jump-started it using Mark's jumper pack and got out of there fast. Later that night, I checked the GPS history on my phone. It showed a gap between 6:08 and 7:55. The trail line just stopped, then picked up again further down the ridge, already headed back toward the road. I checked the health data too, steps, elevation, all of it, and it was like we hadn't moved at all during that time. No movement, no heart rate spikes, nothing. Liz swore up and down she'd filmed the light before her phone died, but there was no video. Just a corrupted file labeled DCIM 11123, wouldn't open. Mark's camera had one photo that was just a white blur. He didn't remember taking it. We all met up 2 days later at a diner in Barstow to compare notes. Everyone felt weird. Not sick, exactly, just tired and off. Like we hadn't really rested since the hike. Jason said he kept hearing this high-pitched hum at night. Liz's smartwatch wouldn't sync with her phone anymore. Mark started having nosebleeds, which he never used to get. And I kept waking up at exactly 2:17 a.m. every night for a week. Eventually things went back to normal. Phones worked, cameras worked, we all stopped talking about it. Not because we forgot, just because we didn't know what to say. I've done plenty of hikes since then, but I haven't been back to the Mojave. None of us have. And we had been out in the desert for maybe an hour before any of it started. My girlfriend Laura and I had driven out late that Saturday night, just looking for some peace and a clear view of the stars. We're both kind of amateur astronomy fans. Nothing fancy, just a couple of folding chairs, a couple of blankets, and Laura's little binoculars. The place we picked was this dirt pull-off about 20 miles west of Tonopah, Nevada, far enough from town lights to actually see the Milky Way spread out like a pale smear across the sky. The night was dry, cold but not freezing. The kind of desert night where you can see your breath, but the air still feels smooth. Not a cloud in sight, and the stars were ridiculously bright, twinkling all over like someone shook a jar full of tiny lights. We'd set up by this rocky ridge, somewhere you could lean back and not worry about trees or hills blocking the view. We were talking quietly, pointing out constellations when Laura suddenly went quiet and turned her binoculars skyward, kind of frozen. I looked up and saw it, a cluster of lights, maybe 6 or 7, grouped tight in the sky. They weren't twinkling like stars, more steady, like LEDs. The thing was, they were hovering, just hanging there in the same spot, not drifting or blinking out. I asked her what she thought it was, but she shrugged and handed me the binoculars. Through them, it was clearer. Those lights were definitely together, forming a rough shape. Nothing I recognized. No blinking lights like on planes, no sound, just this odd grouping, perfectly still. We watched for a while, maybe 10 minutes, neither of us saying much because it didn't make sense. Then, one light peeled off from the cluster and started moving, slowly at first, tracing a wide arc around the others. It wasn't rushing or zigzagging, just this smooth, deliberate circle that must have been at least a quarter-mile wide, given how tiny they looked. The weirdest part was how it moved. There was no sound, no blinking or flashing, just this soft glow. It kept the same brightness the whole time, and after the wide loop, it came back to the cluster, rejoining perfectly. Like a group of birds flying in formation, but these lights didn't move like any bird I've ever seen. No wings, no flutter, nothing. I told Laura, that can't be anything normal. She nodded, eyes wide. We both stayed quiet, just staring up, until the cluster slowly started drifting upward, fading into the night. Not shooting off, just slowly climbing until it was gone. I don't remember when I stopped breathing for a moment, but I know it happened. My mind tried to grab onto any explanation, but none fit. The whole thing lasted maybe 20 minutes. After that, the sky was just empty again, the stars like nothing had happened. We packed up and drove back, both uneasy but not really sure why. The road was dark and quiet, the kind of quiet that presses in. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see some headlights following us, but there was nothing. The next morning, I called the local ranger station, wondering if anyone else reported anything weird. The guy on the phone laughed it off, said some campers always claim to see stuff out there, but no official reports. I tried to look it up later online, but the closest I found were people talking about weird lights in nearby counties. Nothing like what we saw. The strangest thing was that nothing else weird happened that night. No strange noises, no interference with our phones or the car, no feelings of being watched. Just those lights, moving like nothing we'd seen before, then disappearing. I can't say what it was. I don't think it was a plane or a drone. Too high, too steady, too strange the way one moved alone and then rejoined the group. And it definitely wasn't a meteor or satellite. Those move fast and don't stop or loop around. Every time I think about it, I'm left with the same question. What were those lights doing out there in that silent desert sky? The first time it happened, I thought my radio was just acting up. It was an old Zenith I'd picked up at a garage sale years ago, a big box with a wooden frame and a dial that still smelled faintly like cigarette smoke. I'd been tinkering with radios for decades. Retired now, but it was a hobby I kept alive, something to occupy my hands and mind after I left the engineering firm. Anyway, it was late, about 11:47 p.m., though I only knew because I always checked the clock at that time. The radio was set to a local AM station, static humming softly in the background. Suddenly, from the speaker came 3 clear, simple tones in a sequence. Beep, 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 and then nothing else. The static returned, and the dial didn't move. I figured it was some interference, or maybe a nearby transmitter glitch. But that night, curiosity got the better of me, so I grabbed a notebook and jotted down the time and what I'd heard. The next night, exactly the same thing happened at 11:47 p.m. Same 3 tones, same timing. I thought maybe it was a coincidence, or maybe my old radio was picking up some kind of automated message from a local station. But the nights rolled on, and every night at 11:47, the radio would buzz those 3 tones. I started logging it. Date, time, weather, anything that seemed relevant, but the pattern never changed. No variation, no added sounds, no voice, no background noise, just the same 3 tones. What really got to me was that it never happened at any other time. If I turned the radio off or changed the station, the tones didn't come. I had to have it on that exact frequency, and it had to be exactly 11:47 p.m. I set up a timer to make sure I was always awake for it. If I drifted off a little early or late, the tones wouldn't come. It was like some sort of clock that only ticked at one moment, once every 24 hours. The local AM station I tuned to was just a regular talk radio. Nothing special. I called them once, asked if they were broadcasting anything like that, but the technician laughed it off and said it must be interference or some kind of prank. I started testing other radios, my old transistor, a newer digital set, even a shortwave receiver, but none picked up the tones like my Zenith did. That old radio was special in this way. The others just had static. Months passed and I was getting weird looks from my family because I was waking up in the middle of the night to scribble notes about some damn beeps. I didn't care. It felt important in a way I couldn't explain. One night after the tones finished, I waited. I thought maybe the signal would do something else, maybe repeat or change, but nothing. Just silence. Then I heard something else, very faint, like a whisper on the edge of hearing. I strained to listen but couldn't make it out clearly. It didn't sound like radio static, more like a soft hum or maybe wind blowing through a distant tunnel. I checked the frequency again. Still on the same station, still the same spot on the dial. After that, I got a little obsessed. I started recording the transmissions with an old cassette recorder, capturing the exact moment of the tones. When I played it back, the tones were pure, steady, and clear, but that faint whisper wasn't there. It was like it only existed live, impossible to capture. I even tried to map the signal, triangulate where it might be coming from, but there was no pattern, no clear direction. My house was in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of town. No known transmitters around except the local AM and a few police radio towers miles away. One evening, I was out on the porch, waiting for 11:47. The night was clear, dry, the kind of stillness that presses in on you. At exactly the time, the three tones came through the radio, steady and sharp. Then I noticed a light, not bright, more like a flicker off in the distance, maybe a couple of miles away. It wasn't a car or a street lamp. It was higher up like a hovering glow, soft blue-green. I blinked and it was gone. I told myself it was a plane or a helicopter, but nothing flew over our neighborhood that late without noise. And the light was steady before it vanished, no blinking or moving, just there and then not. After that, the feeling that I wasn't alone in this little mystery stayed with me. It wasn't fear exactly, more like an itch under my skin, like something was waiting for me to figure it out. Some nights, when the tones came through, the static would shift, and I'd think I heard faint patterns, maybe Morse code, but nothing consistent. Just noises I could never quite pin down. My wife asked if I wanted to move the radio to another room, but I refused. That old Zenith was the only one that worked. It was almost like it was built for this. I even looked up the model number and date, made in 1953, back when radios were all tubes and dials. One morning I woke up early and found my notes scattered on the floor near the radio. I didn't remember knocking them over, but maybe I did sleepwalk. When I picked them up, I saw a strange thing. The times for the tones weren't always exactly 11:47 anymore. Some nights the logging showed 11:46 or 11:48. I was sure I'd been careful, but the notes didn't lie. That made me question everything. Was I just imagining the exact time? Was my internal clock off? Then I checked the radio again. It was still tuned to the same frequency. The tones came through sharp and clear as always. That same night, the faint whisper returned after the tones, clearer this time. It was like a voice trying to form words, but failing. A kind of broken murmur I could almost understand, but never quite. I didn't record it. I thought maybe if I tried, it would disappear again like before. Over the next weeks, I felt the strange presence more. Sometimes when the tones played, I'd get the feeling of being watched from somewhere far away, like a pair of eyes tracking me through the static. One night, I left the radio on all day, waiting for 11:47 to roll around again. But the tones never came. I checked the radio the next night and found it had switched stations on its own, static filling the speaker. I set it back, and the next night the tones returned. I started thinking maybe the radio itself was acting like a kind of receiver, catching signals from somewhere I couldn't reach, or maybe somewhere else was reaching out to me. There was no logic to it, no patterns, no answers. I've tried explaining it to friends, but they just laugh or change the subject. Even my son thinks I'm wasting my time. But I keep the radio on, tuned to that frequency, and every night I wait for the three tones at 11:47 p.m. Sometimes I think I'm hearing things, or maybe I'm losing it, but the watch by the bedside says it's almost time again. I was driving back home from Denver to Boise, just trying to get through the long haul in one go. It was late October, so the nights were chilly and the roads pretty empty. I had been behind the wheel for maybe 10 hours straight, and around midnight, somewhere near Twin Falls, Idaho, I started feeling it. The kind of exhaustion that just sneaks up and messes with your focus. So I figured I'd pull off at this small rest stop just off the highway to catch a few hours of sleep before finishing the drive in the morning. The rest stop was one of those bare bones places, just a gravel lot, a single porta potty, and some picnic tables under a couple of skeletal trees. I parked my old sedan facing the highway, shut the engine off, and leaned the seat back. I set my phone alarm for 5 a.m., thinking 5 hours would be enough to get me refreshed. When I woke up, I had this odd, heavy feeling, like I'd slept, but not really rested. It was still dark outside, but just barely. The sky had a faint glow from the coming dawn. I checked the clock on the dashboard. It read 5:10 a.m., right about when I expected to be waking up. That's when I noticed the gas gauge. It was sitting dead on empty. That couldn't be right. I'd filled up at a station maybe 50 miles back, and I was careful with gas. My car wasn't a gas guzzler, and the tank was half full when I pulled over. How could it be empty now? I glanced at the odometer. The mileage read 202,354. I swear to myself, I had 202,351 when I parked. 2.3 miles had been added. I frowned and rubbed my eyes, sitting up straighter. There was no way I'd driven any distance while asleep, and the car hadn't moved from where I left it. The gravel was still intact under the tires, no tracks or signs I'd rolled forward or backward. I stepped out to look around, hoping the fresh air would clear my head. The rest stop was still mostly dark except for the faint amber glow from the highway lights. I looked down the highway in both directions. No cars had stopped or passed in the last few hours. Too quiet. Even the wind was calm. I glanced at the gas cap again. It was tightly sealed, no leaks or damage. The smell of gasoline was faint but definitely there, like something had drained the tank. I went back inside the car, grabbed my phone and tried calling my wife Sarah. No signal. That was weird too. This stretch of highway usually had at least some bars. I figured the area is just a dead zone though. I decided to check the Maps app, thinking maybe I'd accidentally driven somewhere and lost time. But the map was stuck on my location, which matched the rest stop exactly. I was starting to get that sinking feeling like something was off beyond just the gas. I tried to remember what I was dreaming about before I woke up, but my mind was fuzzy. It was like a blank patch with only fragments. A soft blue light, quiet whispers I couldn't make out, and this overwhelming sense of being watched. I shook my head, probably just tired. Maybe I dozed off for a while and someone drained my gas, or maybe there was a leak I hadn't noticed. Still, the mileage difference was the thing that stuck with me. I stayed at the rest stop, thinking about what to do next. It was too early to try calling a tow or roadside service, and with no cell signal, that wasn't an option anyway. I figured I'd wait a bit, see if anyone else came along. That's when I noticed the sounds. Not the usual hum of the highway or the occasional wind through the trees, but something else. Very faint and distant, like a low vibration under the earth. It wasn't constant. It would pulse for a few seconds, then fade away. I tried to pinpoint where it was coming from, but it felt like it was everywhere at once. It didn't make any sense. The ground near the rest stop felt solid. No construction or trains or anything that might explain it. I sat in my car watching the dim horizon, and the strange feeling of unease started to build. I wasn't scared exactly, more like confused, like I was missing some key detail. After maybe 20 minutes, I thought I saw something moving in the distance. A small flicker of light near the trees lining the highway. It wasn't a car, no headlights or taillights, just a quick flash of pale white like a lantern or a flashlight, but it didn't move like a person walking. I got out of the car and walked toward the edge of the lot to get a better look. The light flickered again, this time closer, but still not quite visible, like it was behind a screen or mist. When I focused on it, the light vanished. I turned back toward the car, feeling the cold seep deeper into my jacket. The vibration under the ground was stronger now, a steady pulse, almost like a heartbeat. I put my hand on the hood of the car, and the metal seemed to hum with it. I decided to try the engine to see if it would start. The car fired up, but the gas gauge still read empty. The engine sounded a little rough, like it was struggling. I gave the throttle a few revs, and the sound echoed off the empty rest stop. I sat back and looked around again. The light never came back. The vibration faded slowly until it was gone altogether. I drove off the rest stop, taking it slow. The car seemed fine except for the fuel reading. I figured I'd find a gas station soon and fill up. But when I pulled over at the first station, I checked the odometer again. The mileage had ticked up another 2 miles since I left the rest stop, even though I hadn't driven that far. And the gas tank still read empty. The gas pump struggled to fill. It took nearly 10 gallons to top off a tank I was sure was at least half full when I pulled over earlier. I paid, got back in the car, and kept going. The rest of the drive home was uneventful. No strange lights, no vibrations. My phone got signal again once I hit town. When I told Sarah about it later, she just raised her eyebrows. I didn't expect her to believe the part about the mileage or the empty tank. I didn't really believe it myself. I've thought a lot about what happened, especially that weird vibration and the light flickering near the trees. I'm not sure if it was something mechanical, some glitch with the car, or something else. The only thing I'm certain of is that I woke up feeling like I'd slept for hours in one place. But my car had apparently gone somewhere else, at least a couple of miles, without me moving it. And the gas tank was empty when it shouldn't have been. Whatever it was, it left no sign except that little patch of empty gravel and an odometer that didn't add up. The motion light went off again at 3:17 a.m., same as the night before. Third night in a row. It was the one on the back corner of the house, the one facing the field behind the property. The sensors mounted just above the kitchen window. When it trips, it washes about a 60-foot patch of overgrown grass in pale yellow light. Past that, it's just scrub brush and old fence posts, and then another half-acre of open space before the tree line. We've got about 3 acres total out here in southeastern Missouri. I moved in 4 years ago after my divorce. Needed quiet, got more than I bargained for. Anyway, I only knew it had gone off because Boone jumped in the bathtub again. That's his thing when something spooks him. Doesn't matter what it is, thunder, gunshots, once even a wind chime, I'll find him curled up in the tub, shaking like a leaf. Boone's a redbone coonhound mix. He's not young, not old either. Normally doesn't scare easy. He barks at coyotes, patrols the fence line like he owns the whole county. But 3 nights now, same thing. Light clicks on at 3:17 and Boone bolts straight to the bathroom without a sound. The first night I figured it was a raccoon. I went out with the flashlight, checked the yard, checked the barn, nothing. Second night, I was already half awake when Boone took off. This time I looked at the clock. 3:17. Dead on. I got up slower that time, more annoyed than anything, and looked out the kitchen window. The light was on. The yard looked normal. Still as a painting. No movement, no rustling, no bugs even. Just the grass bending a little in the breeze. Then last night, it happened again. Same time, 3:17. I was already awake when Boone scrambled off the bed and made a beeline for the tub. I didn't get up right away. I waited. Just lay there, listening. The house was quiet. No footsteps, no engine sounds, no voices. Just Boone's nails clicking on the tile as he settled in. I finally got up around 3:25, went to the window. The motion light was still on, but just barely, flickering a little like it was about to time out. I stood there for a while staring at that patch of grass. My eyes adjusted, but I didn't see anything out of place. Then I noticed the scarecrow. I don't have a scarecrow, but there was something out there, about 20 feet past the edge of the light, just where the brightness fades into shadow. Looked like a figure, too thin to be a person, too straight to be natural. No limbs I could make out, just a vertical shape like a post or a man standing still with his arms at his sides. I blinked, and it was gone. I thought maybe I imagined it. Could have been a fence post catching the light wrong. Could have been my reflection in the glass. So I opened the back door and stepped out onto the porch. Didn't bring a light. I just stood there in the warm air, letting my eyes adjust all over again. The field was empty. Next morning I walked out there. Took Boone with me, though he didn't want to go at first. I had to leash him, and even then he dragged his feet. There wasn't much to see. Grass a little flattened in spots, but nothing that screamed animal. No prints, no broken stalks, no burn marks or dead patches. Just grass. But when I looked back at the house from that spot where I'd seen the figure, I realized something strange. From there, you can't see the light itself, just the glow. Whatever or whoever was standing in that exact place would have been perfectly framed by it, lit just enough to see their shape, but not their face. That night, I stayed up. Didn't sit in the living room or anything. I sat in the kitchen with the lights off, just me and a cold cup of coffee, and Boone curled up on the rug by the fridge. I kept one eye on the digital clock above the stove. 3:10, 3:15. At 3:17, the light clicked on. No sound, no buzz, no hum, just a soft pop as the bulb came to life. Boone stood up immediately, ears flat, tail low. He didn't look at me. He looked at the window. I stood too, careful not to scrape the chair legs. I walked over to the sink and leaned forward just enough to peek outside. There was something in the field, closer this time, maybe 10 feet from the edge of the light, just barely out of it. Same thin shape, same dead still posture. Not moving, not swaying with the breeze like the grass around it. It was just there, watching, I think. I opened the back door. Boone growled, a sound I'd only heard him make once before, when a neighbor's pit bull got into our yard. He didn't follow me out. I stood on the porch again, this time with my flashlight. I waited until my eyes adjusted, then flipped it on and pointed it right at the spot. Nothing. The figure was gone. But the grass was moving. Not like something walked through it. More like it was settling. Like something heavy had been there, pressing it down, and had just lifted off. It rippled outward in slow waves. No wind, just motion. I didn't walk out there. I wanted to, but my legs wouldn't move. The light timed out after 30 seconds. The yard went dark. I backed into the house and locked the door. Boone was already in the tub. That morning, I found something. Out in the field, in the same spot where the shape had been, I found 3 small holes, each about the size of a quarter, perfectly round, spaced maybe 2 feet apart, forming a triangle. Not deep, maybe 5 inches, but clean. No dirt piled around the edges, like whatever made them hadn't broken the surface so much as pressed through it. I filled them in and covered the area with an old tarp from the barn. I don't know why. That was last week. Since then, the light hasn't come on again. But Boone still sleeps in the bathroom now, every night without fail. Even when I call him to bed, he just looks at me and slinks away like he knows something I don't. I haven't reset the motion sensor. I haven't walked out into the field after dark, and I haven't been able to sleep through 3:17 a.m. since. I was driving through eastern Montana on a late summer night, hauling a load from Seattle to Minneapolis. It was one of those stretches of highway where there's barely any traffic, no towns for miles, just long roads lined by flat fields and the occasional stand of scrubby trees. The sky was mostly clear, but there were some thin clouds drifting low, and the moon was just a sliver, barely lighting up the land. I'd been on the road since early afternoon, and by about 11:30 p.m. I was feeling that familiar creeping tiredness that comes from hours of nothing but highway and the drone of the engine. My dog, Jeb, was curled up in the bunk, snoozing. He's an older mutt, mostly black with a big white patch on his chest. He doesn't bark much, but he's good company for the lonely miles. I glanced over at the GPS and saw I had about 300 miles left to my next stop, a rest area just outside Miles City. I figured I'd keep pushing a bit longer, but then, out of nowhere, a flash lit up the sky ahead. Not lightning, no thunder, and the clouds didn't look stormy, but a sudden, bright white light, almost like a camera flash, but way bigger and more intense, right over the horizon. I slammed on the brakes, pulled off the highway onto the gravel shoulder, and cut the engine. Jeb woke up, looking around groggily, but didn't make a sound. I sat there for a minute, eyes on the sky. The flash didn't repeat, just that one sharp burst of light, then silence. I figured maybe it was a plane or a helicopter with a spotlight, but there was nothing else up there. No sound, no blinking red lights like on aircraft. The radio was dead quiet. I checked the gauges, everything normal. The hum of the engine gone, just the quiet of the night. I leaned back in my seat, thinking maybe I'd just rest my eyes for a bit. That's when I noticed something strange. The usual buzz of insects was missing. Even the wind that usually rustled the dry grass was dead, just still air and that eerie silence. Jeb curled up again, resting his head on my knee. I don't know how long I was there. I checked the clock, 1:15 a.m. I figured I must have been sitting for about 20 minutes. I started the engine, pulled back onto the highway, and continued driving. The road was empty, the sky clear, but something about the whole situation felt off. I stopped at the rest area around 3 a.m. I filled up on coffee, stretched my legs, let Jeb run around the lot for a bit. When I looked at the GPS log later, that's when the weird part hit me. According to the tracker, I hadn't just sat there for 20 minutes like I thought. The truck was completely still for 1 hour and 47 minutes. I stared at the screen, confused. I swear I was only parked for less than half an hour, maybe 20 minutes tops. I checked the time on my phone. It matched the truck's clock now, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't add up. I called a buddy of mine, Nate, who's also a trucker and pretty tech savvy. I asked if the GPS could have glitched or lost signal. He said it was unlikely, The satellite coverage in that area was good, and the device I used was reliable. I went back over everything I could remember from that stretch. The flash, the silence, the feeling that time had slipped somehow. There was no radio chatter, no other vehicles, nothing. I didn't see any other lights, no planes, no cars on the shoulder. The sky was dark, except for a scattering of stars, and the flash was the only bright thing that had happened. On the drive after the rest stop, I kept glancing at the GPS. The time log was clear. I'd been stopped, sitting still, almost 2 hours longer than I thought. That night in the motel, Jeb wouldn't stop pacing. He looked tense, ears twitching toward the window, and he kept low growling at the dark outside. I couldn't sleep either. The more I thought about it, the more unsettled I got. No one else on the road had seen anything. The other truckers I talked to said it was a normal night. I don't know what happened out there, but something about that flash and the time I lost makes me wonder if I wasn't alone. I'm sticking to the logs and the memory I have. I stopped the truck. I saw a flash. I sat there. But how does almost 2 hours disappear when I remember barely 20 minutes? Jeb and I keep our runs, but I avoid that stretch of highway now. Maybe that's for the best. I was going through some trail camera footage one evening after my shift. It was routine, checking for signs of wildlife activity, tracking deer movements, stuff like that. The cameras were set up along a popular hiking trail in the national park where I worked as a ranger. Nothing out of the ordinary, usually. But this time, something caught my eye. The camera had taken a series of photos at night, around 2:30 a.m. I'd seen footage from that area plenty of times before, mostly deer, raccoons, the occasional coyote. But this time, the images didn't look right. 3 consecutive shots were completely black. No animals, no light, nothing visible at all, just pure blackness. At first, I thought maybe the camera had malfunctioned or the memory card was damaged. I checked the timestamps. The first black photo was at 2:31:07 a.m., the second at 2:31:22, and the third at 2:31:37. So about 15 seconds apart, the same as usual, but all 3 were just solid black. That wasn't all. When I tried to play the audio recording that came with the photos, the sound file was corrupted. Every time it got to those moments, the audio filled with a series of loud, rhythmic clicks. Not like animal noises or static interference. These clicks were steady, almost like a pattern. I replayed the clip several times, trying to make sense of it. The clicks were consistent in a sequence. Click, 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 repeated over and over for about a minute. It was so regular it didn't sound random at all. But there was no other sound mixed in, no wind, no footsteps, nothing else. I thought maybe something had tampered with the camera or the memory card, but there was no sign of physical damage. The camera was still firmly attached to the tree branch where we'd installed it a month earlier. The batteries were fine too. I decided to head out there the next morning to check the spot in person. The trail was quiet, early spring, not many visitors yet. When I got to the exact location, the tree the camera was on looked normal. No scratches, no marks, nothing that suggested interference. The area around it was undisturbed, no footprints or broken branches that would suggest someone had been messing with the equipment. I felt a little uneasy standing there. The woods were thick, but the morning sun was filtering through the trees, making everything look calm. Still, that blackness in the photos and those clicks stuck with me. Over the next few days, I reviewed footage from other cameras nearby, trying to find anything strange. Nothing. Every other photo and sound file looked normal. Animals moving about, wind rustling leaves, distant bird calls. No more black images or weird clicks. Then, about a week later, I was back in the office when I got a call from one of the other rangers. He told me there'd been some strange reports from hikers on that same trail late at night. People said they heard weird noises, rhythmic tapping or clicking sounds coming from deep in the woods. No one had seen anything, just the noises. I didn't want to tell him about the camera footage just yet. I wasn't sure if it was connected or if someone was pulling his leg, but the timing was too close to ignore. That night, I decided to hike the trail myself, starting around midnight. I brought a flashlight, extra batteries, and my radio. The forest was quiet except for my footsteps on the dirt path and the occasional distant owl hoot. About halfway down the trail, I thought I heard something. At first, I wasn't sure, maybe the wind or branches scraping together. But then the sound came again, clear and steady. Click, 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 click. It was faint, coming from off the trail, somewhere near a cluster of tall pines. The sound wasn't loud, but it carried through the still air like a slow, patterned tapping. I stopped walking, turned off my flashlight, and listened. The clicks repeated, evenly spaced. I swung my beam around the trees, trying to find the source. Nothing visible. No animals. No people. The clicking stopped after a minute. I waited a little longer, but everything else was silent again. I didn't want to push further into the woods in the dark alone, so I turned back slowly, my heart picking up. As I walked, I felt like I was being watched. But whenever I glanced over my shoulder, there was nothing. The rest of the hike back to the ranger station was uneventful. I checked the radio. No signals or chatter except static. When I got back, I told the other rangers about the clicks. No one had any explanation. Some joked about woodpeckers or maybe some kind of animal behavior we hadn't seen before. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was something else. The next day, I looked at the camera footage again. The 3 black photos were still on the memory card, surrounded by normal images. I zoomed in on the photos before and after. The one before showed a blurry shape near the edge of the frame, but it was too dark and out of focus to tell what it was. The one after the black shots was a normal night scene, empty trail, some branches, nothing unusual. I ran the audio through a basic spectrogram program, hoping to find some hidden pattern or frequency. The clicks showed as clear spikes at regular intervals, but nothing else unusual. I tried to get a specialist to analyze the sound, but nobody I contacted could identify it. They said it didn't match any known animal sounds or equipment interference. After a few weeks, I stopped getting reports from hikers, and the trail returned to normal. The clicks never happened again during my shifts, but sometimes when I'm reviewing footage late at night or walking those trails alone, I swear I can hear a faint clink in the distance. Not loud, just enough to make me turn my head. I've kept the camera and the footage stored away in my office. Every so often, I look at those 3 black photos and listen to that corrupted sound file, hoping to find a clue I missed. I don't know what caused it or what was out there that night. All I know is that for a few minutes in the middle of the night, something was there. Something that didn't show up on the images, but left a sound that didn't belong. We were heading back from fishing out near Lake Meredith, me, Tessa, and my cousin Wyatt. It was late, somewhere past 11, and we'd taken the old service road instead of the highway, which was probably stupid, but we were in Wyatt's truck, and he liked cutting through that stretch for the view, even though it's just brush, dirt, and wind turbines. We didn't see another car for miles, just dry, flat land and those tall white turbines spinning slow in the dark. The sky was clear, no moon, but you could see every star. It was one of those weirdly warm spring nights, like it should have been cold, but the air felt heavy and still. No wind at all. We were maybe 15 minutes from getting back to town when we saw the car. It was a gray sedan, parked half in the road and half on the shoulder, maybe 30 yards ahead. Headlights were on. Driver's door hanging wide open. Engine running, we could hear it as we got closer, Zard, this soft, uneven hum that didn't sound right. Wyatt slowed down and we just sort of stared at it. No one inside, no movement. He pulled over a few feet back from it and left his truck running. None of us got out at first. We were just quiet. Then Tessa said, "That's weird," and I remember her voice sounded flat. Not scared exactly, just off. I got out first, walked up slow, hands in my hoodie pocket. I think part of me expected someone to pop out, maybe a guy peeing in the bushes or someone changing a flat, but there weren't any bushes, and the tires were fine. I leaned in and looked around the interior, purse on the passenger seat, phone in the cup holder, keys still in the ignition. The headlights were shining out into the field beside the road, and that's when I saw it. Right where the beams hit, maybe 30 feet ahead, was a perfect circle of scorched grass, not trampled, not burned like from a fire, just blackened. Charred all the way through, but nothing around it was touched. Just this flat, round patch about the size of a backyard pool, maybe 15 feet across. Wyatt came up behind me and said, "That ain't a campfire." And he was right. There was no debris, no tire tracks near it, no sign of anything burning its way in or out. And the weirdest part, the grass wasn't flattened. It was still standing up, just dead, black and brittle like it had been cooked straight through. Tessa stayed in the truck. She rolled the window down and asked if we should call it in. I said, yeah, maybe. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the car and the patch in the same frame. But when I opened the gallery to check, it was just black. Like the lens cap had been on, even though it obviously wasn't. I tried again. Same thing, just pure black squares. Not blurry, not overexposed, just nothing. I didn't say anything right then. I just stuck the phone back in my pocket. Wyatt circled the sedan, looking for signs of damage. There weren't any. The rear passenger door had a small smear of mud on it, like someone brushed past in a hurry. That was it. The grass along the edge of the field hadn't been stepped on either. No trail, no prints. He popped his head into the driver's side and looked around. "It's in park," he said. "Full tank. Windows down in the back, no wallet." I asked if it could have been stolen and ditched. He just gave me a look like, stolen and ditched in the middle of nowhere with the lights on and the keys still in it? Didn't add up. We stood there for a bit, not saying much, just listening. The air felt wrong, like it was too quiet. No bugs, no wind, just that low hum of the engine and the turbines turning way off in the distance. Then something buzzed, Wyatt's phone. He checked it and frowned. "No service," he said, and held it up like that'd change anything. I looked at mine. Same. No bars, which didn't make sense because we were close enough to the wind farm that there were usually 3 towers in range. I'd streamed YouTube in that area before. Wyatt said we should drive into town and report it. Let the sheriff's office handle it. I agreed. But then he turned to get back in the truck and froze. What the hell? I looked. Tessa was gone. Passenger door still shut, window still down. Her seat was empty. I took off running, yelled her name. No answer. I ran around the side of the truck, half expecting her to be crouched behind it messing with us. But she wasn't there. Driver's side door still shut too. The grass on the shoulder undisturbed. It couldn't have been more than 10 seconds since we saw her last. She couldn't have gotten far. There was nothing to hide behind anyway, just flat land and sky and that burnt circle out in the field. Wyatt shouted and took off toward it. I followed. We got to the edge and stopped. It was cold near the patch. Not like a breeze, just colder. The air dropped 10 degrees. You could feel it in your teeth. The soil crunched under our boots like it had been through a fire, but there was no ash. Nothing drifting or smoldering. Just dry blackness. We circled the edge. No tracks in or out. No sound except our breathing. Then we heard the truck horn. We spun around, headlights flashed. Tessa was back in the truck, sitting in the front seat, eyes wide. She looked pale. Wyatt sprinted back, calling her name. I was right behind him. When we got there, she was shaking. Said she didn't remember leaving the truck. 1 second she was watching us by the sedan. The next, she was sitting in the seat, alone. She swore she hadn't moved. But her boots were dusty like she'd been walking through the field, and there was a smudge of soot on the back of her jacket. We didn't ask more questions. We just left. We drove straight to the sheriff's office and reported the car, gave the location, told them it looked abandoned, left out the rest. Next morning, we called to follow up. The deputy said they'd found the vehicle, but nothing unusual. Just a stalled sedan, engine cold, no sign of the owner. Towed it to impound. No mention of the scorched grass. No report of the door being open. I asked if they found a purse or phone inside. They said no. Clean interior. Nothing of note. I checked my phone again later that day. The pictures I'd taken were gone. Not even black squares anymore. Just missing. Like they never existed. The only trace was a blank spot in my camera roll where the thumbnails skipped a few seconds. We didn't talk about it again after that. Not really. Tessa won't go near that part of the county anymore. Wyatt sold the truck a few months later, claimed it had electrical issues, but I never saw any. I still think about that car. The way the engine sounded like it was straining. The way the grass was just dead in a perfect circle. I don't have a word for what we saw. All I know is we weren't supposed to be there. The whole thing started on a Tuesday. I was sitting at my kitchen table in Harlan Ridge, this tiny town in northern Vermont where everybody knows everybody, and my wall clock just stopped. No ticking, no hands moving, just dead. It was 3:17 p.m., and it froze there like someone hit pause on it. That might not sound like much, but it wasn't the first one to go out that day. By dinner, my neighbor, Susan, told me her microwave had stopped working halfway through cooking dinner. Then her phone's screen started flickering weirdly, and the digital clock on her stove jumped back and forth between numbers like it was glitching out. Across the street, old Mr. Ledbetter said his grandfather clock stopped chiming right on the hour. He's usually full of stories, but this time, he looked confused and a little worried. I figured it was some kind of power surge or transformer issue. Maybe a storm was rolling in. But the sky was clear, cool for late summer, but no clouds, no wind, nothing that looked like trouble. That night, the power flickered a few times, but it never went out fully. The clocks in town that I checked were all messed up. Some stopped, some jumped forward or backward by random amounts. What creeped me out most was how the town's streetlights seemed to buzz softly, like they were straining against something invisible. I asked around, but most people just shrugged it off or said their gadgets were acting up. I kept a journal after that. If I'm honest, I wanted to convince myself it was just electrical weirdness. But then, the strange things started happening to me. About 3 days in, I was walking home late after my shift at the hardware store. The street was quiet, a little fog rolling in from the hills. My wristwatch showed 11:42 p.m. when I glanced at it. A minute later, I realized I had no idea how I got from the corner to my porch. Like I'd blinked, and suddenly I was standing there with the door key in my hand. The whole walk was missing. I checked my watch, still 11:42. No seconds had passed. My heart started racing, but I shook it off, telling myself maybe I just got distracted or lost track of time. A couple nights later, I was sitting on the porch with Luna, my dog, a little mutt with bright eyes and a stubborn streak. We'd been hearing this low static hum around the neighborhood, almost like a distant radio, but no station or voice ever came through. I looked up at the streetlights. They were flickering again. Then Luna froze, ears up, staring down the road like she saw something I didn't. The static hummed louder in my ears. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up. I checked my phone for the time, 10:03 p.m. The streetlights buzzed with electricity, but as I watched, they suddenly blinked out one by one. The whole block went dark except for the faint glow from a few porch lights. I swear I heard something move in the shadows beyond the trees, a soft rustling. Luna growled low and pulled at her leash. I told her it was nothing, but when I looked up again, the streetlights flickered back on as if nothing had happened. The static hum was gone too. That's when I realized other people were experiencing weird things too. At the hardware store, one guy told me he'd lost 20 minutes while working on his car. He looked at the clock in his garage, then suddenly it was almost lunch, and he had no memory of what happened between. Another friend said her digital alarm clock rang in the middle of the night, but when she checked, the time was frozen at 3:33 a.m., and the clock never moved again. The whole town felt off. People talked about missing time episodes, but were reluctant to bring it up openly. It was like we all suspected something strange was happening, but didn't want to say it out loud. One night, I set up a small voice recorder by my bedside to catch anything unusual. At about 2 a.m., it picked up a low-frequency buzzing mixed with a faint clicking sound. It lasted maybe 20 seconds, then stopped. When I woke up, my bedside clock was frozen at 2:02 a.m. A few nights later, Luna woke me up barking. I got up and went to the window. Outside, the sky was darker than usual. No stars, no moon, just a dull, heavy blackness hanging over the town. The streetlights buzzed again, this time with a strange blue flicker. I thought I saw a shape moving between the trees on the hill behind my house, tall, thin, and standing perfectly still. I grabbed my jacket and went outside, Luna pulling hard on the leash. I called out, but there was no reply. The air was thick and cold, though the thermometer said it was almost 70 degrees. The streetlights blinked off again, plunging me into darkness for a few seconds before flickering back on. I looked toward the hill, but the shape was gone. After that, the clock and electrical problems got worse. My neighbor's router stopped working, then her television died. Her digital photo frame showed static instead of pictures. Other neighbors reported their car radios acting strange, turning on by themselves or changing stations rapidly. I started noticing odd things about my own electronics. My phone battery drained in hours, even though I barely used it. The flashlight app flickered on and off. My laptop keyboard sometimes typed random letters when I wasn't touching it. The missing time episodes got longer too. One afternoon, I was fixing a shelf in the garage when I realized it was suddenly dark outside. My watch said it had jumped forward 3 hours, but I had no memory of what happened in between. Luna was asleep by the door, unfazed. I started keeping my door locked even during the day. The whole town seemed to hold its breath like something was about to happen. People's eyes looked tired, anxious. One evening, I was sitting on the porch after dinner watching the sunset bleed orange into the sky. The humming returned, soft, mechanical, but not quite. I glanced down the street. The streetlights buzzed, their glow uneven. The shadows between houses looked too long, like they stretched toward me. Luna was restless, pacing near the door. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with a message. But when I unlocked it, there was nothing there, just a blank screen. I looked up. The streetlights all blinked out at once, plunging the neighborhood into darkness. A moment later, they returned, but the glow was colder, harsher, almost sterile. Then, a flash of white light from the hill behind the houses. It was brief, like a camera flash, but enough to blind me for a second. Luna growled sharply and pulled me back inside. I closed the door behind me and checked the clocks around the house. All of them were stopped, some at strange times, others with hands spinning slowly backward. I sat down, heart pounding, staring at the black screens and frozen dials. The next morning, the power was back to normal, the clocks all ticking again, appliances working as usual. People acted like nothing had happened, but I know it did. And sometimes when the night is still and the lights buzz low, I swear I can feel time bending just out of reach, like the world skips a beat and forgets me for a little while. I don't know what it means, I just know it's real. It started with a box of old paperwork in the garage. I was going through stuff to make space. My daughter had finally talked me into turning the back wall into shelves for her garden supplies, and I found a stack of binders from my last years at the tower. I retired from FAA operations in 2012 after 33 years, most of that spent working air traffic control at Minneapolis Center. Sector work, mostly. Some tower shifts when they needed coverage. I hadn't thought about that job in a long time. I loved it, but it wore me out. The rotating shifts, the constant focus. It messes with your head after a few decades. Anyway, I opened one of the binders just to flip through, and I found this log sheet, Sector R57, high altitude over northern Wisconsin. The radar track was highlighted in yellow, which is something we usually only did when we flagged an unusual incident. I didn't remember this one at all. The code on the sheet was just unknown 4930. No transponder, no flight plan, nothing. That wasn't entirely unheard of. Military aircraft sometimes do low-key passes, or small planes show up without squawking. But what caught me was the path. I pulled out the old radar plots from the folder and laid them out on the workbench. Each page showed a 5-minute interval. And this track was bizarre. It started like a normal intercept. Entered the sector at FL 370, coming down from the northeast. No ID, no handoff. Speed was high, well above what I'd expect from a private jet or commercial. Then it slowed. Not gradually, like an instant deceleration. From what would have been Mach 0.9 to almost a hover in the span of one sweep. That's not the kind of thing you see on FAA radar. The next few sweeps showed it drifting in a slow arc. It doubled back, drew a half loop, then traced a perfect circle. Like someone had programmed it to draw shapes, but every motion was fluid. No sharp turns, no altitude loss, just these impossible patterns that no aircraft I know could manage. I figured maybe the radar system glitched. That happens sometimes with echoes or when a transponder got jammed up, but usually that shows as jumpy, broken data. This was too smooth, too intentional, and it was only the one target. Everything else in the airspace was clean. The weirdest thing was the time. It stayed in our sector for 26 minutes, never crossed a boundary. It moved around like it was playing, drew tight spirals, S-curves, loops so tight no jet could have pulled them without disintegrating, and then it just vanished. No exit sweep, no fade. It just disappeared between scans. The notes in the margin just said, no visual confirmation, no pilot reports, NORAD pinged, negative response, logged for review. I flipped through the rest of the binder and found another log. Same date, same general area, 2 hours later. An American Eagle flight out of Duluth had radioed in to report a bright white light above cloud layer, pacing us at constant distance, no altitude reading. ATC had asked them to clarify, and the crew said it wasn't a plane. Not moving like one, hovered, then shifted left. Still with us. They lost sight of it 10 minutes later when they dropped below the clouds. That wasn't filed as a serious incident, just a light anomaly note in the comment section. I looked up the flight on my laptop, September 8th, 2011, flight 4820. It did exist. The timing lined up, but there's no mention anywhere of an encounter. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The track, the way it moved like it wasn't constrained by physics, and we had the radar return. It wasn't a blip. It was 30 scans worth of data, consistent, real. I dug out my old thumb drive with the archival software. It barely ran on my current computer, but I got it to load. Plugged in the coordinates from the radar sheet, set the time window, and ran the playback. The track showed up in blue, a ghost moving through empty sky. I zoomed in. The loops weren't random. They were geometrically perfect. A figure 8 that retraced itself to the pixel. A tight diamond. Then a sudden vertical climb, 2,000 feet in under a second. The system capped it at FL 600, but the trail kept going up. It just clipped out of range. I'd never seen anything like it. The system labeled it Unknown Class A. That was an internal tag we use sometimes for clutter or birds that registered above normal airspace, but this wasn't that. It was too clean, too deliberate. I emailed my old coworker Greg, who retired a few years after me. We used to run the same shifts. I asked if he remembered anything about that night, September 8th, 2011, R57, weird radar track. He called me the next morning. Yeah, he said. I remember that. He didn't elaborate at first, just sat there breathing into the phone. Then he said, we weren't supposed to talk about it. Apparently they had a closed-door meeting the day after. A couple guys from DC flew in. Not FAA, not military. Greg wasn't sure who. They asked for all the logs, all the playback files. No one got in trouble. They just handed it over, and that was it. Did you ever find out what it was? I asked. No, he said. But it wasn't a glitch. We talked for a while. He told me he'd seen the radar feed in real time. He was on comms with a flight out of Thunder Bay when it popped up. He thought it was a drone at first, but it was too high, too fast. And when he tried to tag it, the system kicked it back, said no transponder. He tried to hand it off to the next sector. They didn't see anything. I asked him if anyone had scrambled jets. He said no. They ran a few checks with NORAD, but nothing went up. The more I thought about it, the more it bothered me. Not just what it was, but how easily it got brushed aside. We logged it, boxed it up, and forgot it. 2 nights ago, I went back through the rest of the box, found another incident from 2007, similar path, similar altitude. No ID. This one was even shorter, only 5 minutes. Just a single jagged turn and a vertical ascent. Same sector. There was no follow-up on that one. No notes. Just no conflict reported. I haven't told my family. My daughter would roll her eyes. She thinks I spend too much time in the garage anyway. But I printed out the track from that 2011 log, the one with the loops, and pinned it above my workbench. It doesn't look like a flight path. It looks like something drawn by a compass. I've run the numbers on the loops, the angles, the distances. They're too exact, too intentional. Nothing flies like that. Not here, not with wings. I was walking Barley like I always do around 11:30, just before bed. He's a wire-haired pointer mix, kind of scrappy looking but sweet. We live in a neighborhood just outside Spokane, one of those places where the houses start to get spaced out, and you can actually see the stars if it's clear out. That night was cold and still. October. No wind, no moon. I remember that because I could hear everything. Crickets, a train way off in the distance, even the clicking of Barley's nails on the pavement. We were halfway through our usual loop, about 3 blocks from home. Same route I've taken 100 times. We were cutting through the side street that curves around behind a line of older ranch houses. There's no streetlights back there, just porch lights and some soft glow from windows. Barley was sniffing like crazy along one of the fences, tugging the leash like he usually does when he finds some rabbit scent. Then he stopped. Not a slow stop, like a planted full-body halt. His front legs stiffened, head snapped up, tail down. I gave the leash a little tug and said his name, but he didn't move, just stared straight up. I looked up too, thinking maybe an owl or something, but there was nothing. Just the dark sky and a handful of stars. He started whining. Low at first, then this weird high-pitched sound I'd never heard from him before. He wasn't looking around, just locked on to this one spot above us. I stood there with him maybe 10 seconds, feeling stupid, scanning the sky for anything. I even said out loud, "What are you looking at?" And then the crickets stopped. That's what made me nervous. I didn't notice it right away, but once I did, it was like my ears were suddenly underwater. No bugs, no distant train, no wind. Just me and Barley in this dead quiet patch of street under a sky that suddenly felt way too big. He started backing up slowly, still looking up, still whining, moving his paws like he was walking on ice. I crouched down to check his eyes, thinking maybe something had gotten in them, but he wouldn't even glance at me. It was like he couldn't break focus from that one spot above us. I followed his gaze again. Still nothing. But standing there, I don't know. It was like the air was thick. Not cold exactly, but heavy. The way it gets before a thunderstorm. I kept waiting for something to move up there. For a plane to pass, or even a bird. But the sky stayed empty, and Barley wouldn't stop whining. I finally picked him up. He weighs close to 60 pounds, so it wasn't easy, but I got him in my arms and started walking back the way we came. Every few steps I'd glance up, and every time I'd feel this tightness in my chest, like I was missing something obvious. About a block from the house, Barley twisted and wriggled until I set him down. He bolted ahead, pulling at the leash so hard I had to jog to keep up. He didn't even stop at the yard to pee like usual, just ran straight up to the door, tail low, pacing in a circle while I fumbled with the keys. Inside, he wouldn't leave the kitchen, wouldn't even go near the sliding glass door in the living room. I left the TV on that night and slept with the hallway light, which I hadn't done since I was a kid. Next morning, everything seemed fine. Barley was normal, ate his breakfast, wagged when I grabbed the leash, so I figured maybe he smelled something weird, or maybe a bat was flying overhead and I just didn't see it. That night, I avoided the side street and took the longer route by the school. He was fine. No weird stops, no whining. Same thing the next night. I kind of forgot about it. Until Friday. We were passing the same stretch. Not the same night, not the same time, but close enough. I had my headphones in, just one earbud, so I could still hear Barley if he barked. He was trotting a little ahead of me, ears up, tongue out. Normal. Then he stopped again. Different from before, though. This time, he turned and looked behind us. I paused the music and followed his gaze. Nothing. Street was empty, houses all dark. I turned in a full circle, but we were completely alone. I took a step, but Barley didn't move. Then the porch light on the house next to us flickered. Not on and off, it flickered like it was struggling to stay on. The bulb buzzed audibly, this faint, high-pitched whine that didn't sound right. I looked up at it, and for a second I thought I saw a shadow move across the light, like something passed in front of it. But there was nothing there. No branches, no bugs, nothing. Barley growled. Not loud, but low and deep. That's when I heard this faint clicking sound, like someone lightly tapping metal together. I thought it was coming from the porch, but it echoed weirdly, like it was above us. I stepped back into the street and looked up. Still nothing. But then the light went out completely, and I swear I felt something shift in the air. Like pressure, not wind, just movement. Like something had passed overhead too fast to see, but slow enough to feel. Barley bolted. This time I didn't pick him up. I just ran with him, leash taut, neither of us looking back. My legs felt weirdly light, like I was running downhill even though the street's flat. The sound didn't follow us. It stopped completely once we turned the corner. Like crossing that intersection cut something off. Back home, Barley went under the table and wouldn't come out. I kept checking the windows like I was expecting someone to be out there. Next day, I walked the street again, in daylight. Looked for anything. Security cams, bird nests, even weird wiring. Nothing. I even checked that porch light. It was back on. Steady glow, no flicker. I didn't knock or anything, just stood on the sidewalk like an idiot, trying to listen. Later that week, I got curious and checked the weather data for that night. No storms, no unusual cloud cover. Clear sky, no wind, no seismic activity either. I looked that up too. I haven't walked that route since. I drive Barley to a park now, even though it's way out of the way. He hasn't acted weird since. But sometimes at night, when I take the trash out or grab something from the car, I get this feeling like something's above me. I look up. Nothing. Just stars. But sometimes it feels like one of them isn't where it should be. I wasn't supposed to be there. Not really. The fence was old, rusty, and topped with those warning signs that you usually just glance at and ignore, but I knew it was off limits. The security cameras, the patrols, they were real enough. Still, it was a perfect spot for stargazing, far enough out of town where the sky opened up and the light pollution from Silver Springs didn't blot out the stars. My name's Ely, and I was 16 at the time. I didn't have much else going on that summer night except a flashlight, a blanket, and this intense need to see something different. I'd heard rumors about the zone, calls from the older kids about strange lights, weird noises. They said the government kept stuff there, experimental or secret or whatever. Me, I just wanted to watch the stars in peace, maybe catch a meteor shower if I was lucky. So I slipped through a break in the fence around 11 p.m. Careful not to trip on the wire or make noise that would set off alarms. The air was cooler than I expected for July, dry and carrying the smell of sage and dirt. My dog, a scrappy mutt named Patch, trailed behind me, his nails clicking softly on the gravel. I found a spot by an old dirt road, away from the nearest cluster of lights. Laid out my blanket and sat down, leaning back to stare up. The Milky Way stretched overhead in thick, milky streaks. The moon was just a thin crescent, barely bright enough to dim the stars. Patch curled up beside me, his tail twitching in his sleep. At first, everything felt normal. I caught a few shooting stars, blinked hard trying to hold on to the peaceful quiet, but then I noticed something strange near the horizon to the northeast. A group of lights, small but bright, hovering together in a formation that looked too neat to be planes or helicopters. They stayed perfectly still, almost like they were waiting. I squinted, tried to see if they were blinking or moving, but nothing, no sound either. The air was still except for the soft rustling of the brush. After a few minutes, the lights shifted. Not slowly, like something floating in the wind. They split apart in a way that didn't seem possible. They separated in perfect unison, each light moving on a different path but staying synchronized, like dancers in a routine. And then just as quickly, they reformed back into the original pattern. No gaps, no mistakes, perfectly timed. I blinked and checked my eyes, sure I was imagining it. Patch stirred, lifted his head, and growled softly, looking up. I whispered to him to calm down, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. The whole thing repeated a few times, the lights breaking apart and snapping back together faster than anything mechanical I'd ever seen. Each time, they made patterns that seemed deliberate, almost geometric. Lines, triangles, clusters that morphed fluidly. It was mesmerizing, but also a little unsettling. I kept waiting for some kind of sound or disturbance, but nothing. No engines, no hum, no blinking aircraft lights. Just these smooth, bright orbs moving perfectly in sync, like a single organism with multiple parts. I fumbled for my phone, but of course, no signal out here. I tried to take a picture, but the light was too faint to show up clearly, and the camera couldn't catch the quick movements anyway. It felt like I was watching something that was meant to be seen with the naked eye only. After a while, the formation suddenly scattered in all directions, vanishing behind the hills faster than I thought was physically possible. The sky went completely dark in that area, like someone switched off a string of lights all at once. Patch jumped up, barking sharply, ears pinned back. I stood up, flashlight in hand, scanning the hills and brush. Nothing moved. No other lights, no signs of people or vehicles. The only sound was Patch's breathing and the distant call of an owl. Uh, I wanted to leave then. I really did. But as I turned to pack up, I noticed something else. Small patches of the dirt near my blanket looked disturbed, like something heavy had pressed down on it. But there were no footprints or tire tracks, just these weird circular depressions that weren't there when I arrived. Patch sniffed around them, growled low, and backed up against me. I didn't understand it. The ground was soft from a recent rain, so anything heavy would leave a mark, but there was nothing else, no signs of anything or anyone. I started walking back toward the fence, my heart pounding, glancing over my shoulder every few steps. The sky was still clear, the stars bright, but the quiet felt too heavy, like the whole desert was holding its breath. I got out through the gap and ran back to the truck, feeling the cold sweat on my neck. Patch climbed in without being told, shaking himself off and looking at me like he wanted to get as far away as possible. The next morning, I went back with my dad, hoping to find some explanation. The circular marks were still there in the dirt, but the weird part was they didn't match anything familiar. No animal tracks, no tire impressions, just these shallow, smooth depressions, perfectly round. We took pictures and measured them. They were bigger than a man's hand, but smaller than a tire. My dad Joe joked maybe it was some kind of animal digging, but neither of us could figure out what. I haven't gone back since. Sometimes I look up at the sky from my bedroom window and wonder if those lights are still out there, doing whatever it was I saw. Patch won't go near the edge of town after dark now. He stays close, like he remembers something too. I don't know what I saw that night. It wasn't drones or planes or satellites. It didn't make sense, but it was real. And that silence, the way the grass and dirt acted, the perfect patterns in the sky, something about it felt way beyond anything I'm used to. I was hiking alone one night, out in the mountains where the sky is supposed to be really clear. I'd picked a trail I hadn't tried before just to get some distance from the usual weekend crowds. It was around midnight when I stopped at a little clearing to catch my breath, looking up. The stars were bright, way more than I was used to seeing from the city. I leaned back against a tree and just stared up at the sky for a while. I'm no astronomer or anything, but I'd always liked watching the constellations, Orion, the Big Dipper, that kind of stuff. That night, the sky felt weird, but not in a dramatic way. Just off, like something was subtly wrong. At first, I thought maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. The stars above me, the whole sky, seemed to shift a little bit. Not like moving fast or anything, but like the whole pattern was sliding sideways very slowly. It wasn't like the Earth turning. I know enough about that. It felt like the stars themselves were shifting. I blinked, expecting the effect to stop, or at least change. But when I opened my eyes again, the stars had snapped right back into their usual spots. I rubbed my eyes and looked up again, and the same slow shift started. It was subtle, but definitely there. I sat there for maybe 5 minutes, blinking a bunch and watching. Every time I blinked, the stars realigned perfectly. Every time I opened my eyes, they'd start drifting out of place again, slowly sliding to the side like the sky was warped or bent just for me. It felt like the world itself was breathing, only it wasn't the air or the trees, it was the stars. And somehow I was the only one who could see it. I started to feel kind of uneasy. The forest was silent except for some distant rustling, probably animals moving around. I kept looking around, half expecting to see someone watching me or something strange in the shadows, but nothing was there. I checked my phone for the time. Battery was low, but it showed 12:15. I tried to call my buddy who was supposed to meet me at the trailhead in a couple hours, but the signal was gone. That wasn't unusual out here, but it added to the weirdness. I packed up my stuff slowly, eyes still flicking back to the sky. The slow star shift happened a few more times as I got moving, always disappearing when I blinked, always creeping back when I looked. As I walked back down the trail, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. I'd stop and listen, but no footsteps or voices, just the trees and the night. Every time I looked over my shoulder, the shadows seemed to flicker oddly, like they weren't quite right. The stars kept drifting and snapping back as I hurried down, and I found myself blinking more than usual, almost unwillingly. I couldn't tell if it was just fatigue or if something was messing with my vision. After about an hour, I reached a spot where the trees thinned out and I could see the lights of a town far below. That was normal, comforting. The stars seemed to stop shifting once I was closer to the lights, or maybe I just stopped noticing it. I wasn't sure. When I got back to my car, the normal night sounds of the highway and distant cars felt loud. I checked the sky one last time before I got in. The stars were where they were supposed to be. I drove home feeling off, like I'd seen something I shouldn't have, but I couldn't say what. I've looked up at the stars a lot since then, but never saw anything like that again. Sometimes, when I'm alone outside at night, I think I catch a glimpse of that slow shift again, but I'm not sure if it's real or just my mind playing tricks. I pulled off the highway at that rest area just before midnight. I'd been driving all day, running on fumes, and figured I'd get some shut-eye before making the last leg of the run. The place wasn't much, just some concrete slabs with a few scattered trucks, a dimly lit bathroom building, and a couple of vending machines. Nothing fancy. I parked my rig in the far corner, away from the others, and settled in for a few hours. I remember turning off the engine, grabbing my phone to check the time, 3:17 a.m. I set my alarm for 4 hours later, laid back, and closed my eyes. It wasn't long before I passed out. The first thing I noticed when I woke up was that everything felt off. Not in a I slept weird way, but like the whole world was just slightly wrong. I blinked against the pale light coming through the window. The sky outside wasn't dark like it should have been at 3 in the morning. It was this strange, dull color, sort of a muted greenish gray. I rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe I was still dreaming or had some kind of weird sleep paralysis. But no, the sky stayed that same weird color, and the air felt heavy and still. I glanced around the cab, trying to shake off the grogginess. That's when I noticed all my clocks, my phone, the little digital one on the dashboard, even the clock on my CB radio, were frozen. All of them stuck at exactly 3:17. That didn't make any sense. I'd just woken up. At least I thought I had. I checked my phone again. Dead screen. Tried to turn it on a couple times. Nothing. The battery was full when I went to sleep, so it shouldn't have died already. I started to feel uneasy, the kind of uneasy that crawls up your spine without making a sound. Then I heard it, a low, steady hum coming from underneath my trailer. It wasn't the usual sound of trucks idling or the highway traffic in the distance. This was different, smooth, continuous, and almost mechanical, but not in any way I could place. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable, like something was vibrating beneath me. I climbed out of the cab, squinting into the dim light outside. I checked under the trailer, but there was nothing there. No equipment, no animals, nothing that could explain the humming. I walked back to the cab and tried to start the engine. The key turned, the dashboard lights flickered, but the engine didn't catch. I tried again and again, but nothing. Then I looked up at the sky. The color wasn't changing, not getting darker like it should. It was stuck, like a broken picture hanging in place. I decided to head to the bathroom building, hoping maybe someone else was awake, or at least to get a better look at the sky away from my truck. As I walked, the humming grew quieter, almost fading into the background. When I reached the building, I noticed it was empty. No sounds from inside, no flicker of light in the windows. Even the vending machines were dead. No lights, no noises. I tried the door, it was unlocked but heavy. Inside, the air was stale and cold, and the fluorescent lights above were off. I found the restroom, looked in the mirror, and that's when the unease really settled in. My reflection looked the same, but the room felt hollow. Like the light wasn't really there, just pretending. I looked outside through the window. The sky stayed that same dull green-gray. And then I thought I saw something, a shadow, just out of the corner of my eye. I spun around, but there was nothing. No one else was there. I went back outside, and that's when I noticed my truck's dash clock again, still frozen at 3:17. I reached into my pocket for my phone once more. Dead. No signal, no sound. I sat on the concrete slab outside the bathroom building, trying to make sense of any of it. Then, without warning, the humming started up again, louder this time. Not beneath my trailer, but somewhere close. Maybe inside the field next to the rest area. I stood up and shone my flashlight toward the tall grass. The beam caught something moving, something smooth and dark, but it slipped behind a tree before I could see what it was. I called out, but my voice sounded distant, like it was being swallowed by the still night. The humming stopped again. I stayed where I was, not sure whether to head back to the truck or try to find someone. Anyone. I finally got up and walked back toward the cab. As I got closer, the humming started again, this time steady and low, but I could feel it vibrating through the ground. I sat in the cab, trying to start the engine again. It was no use. Then I noticed something else. The little green light on the dashboard that usually blinks when the ABS is active, normally off while parked, was blinking steadily in sync with the humming. I reached down and turned off the ignition completely. The light went out, the humming stopped, and the sky finally started to darken, fading back to normal night colors. I blinked a few times and everything was normal again. The clock on my phone turned back on, showing 3:19. The dash clock started moving again. I didn't stay long after that. I started the engine, and it fired up right away. I pulled out of the rest area without looking back. I told a couple of other truckers about it later, but no one had ever heard of anything like it happening there before. I don't know what that humming was, or why the clock stopped at 3:17. I don't know why the sky was that weird color or what moved behind those trees. All I know is that night was different, and part of me still wonders if I really woke up at all. I was working the northern stretch of Mahler Ridge Preserve near the state line. This was late October, after most of the tourists and day hikers had cleared out. We had maybe 1 or 2 cars in the lot a day, if that. I liked that part of the year. Quiet trails, foggy mornings, no one leaving trash or trying to feed the deer granola bars. My patrol zone covered about 8 miles of back trail, mostly old logging roads and thick forest that the state hadn't touched in years. Dense pine, no cell service, and very little wildlife aside from the usual elk and rabbits. I'd do the loop every other day, check for washouts or illegal camps, that kind of thing. I had this dog, Maisie, Australian cattle dog mix. Smart as hell, good trail partner. She stayed close, didn't chase things, always came back on the first whistle. She knew those woods better than most people. That week, I was checking an old fire break that ran along a bluff overlooking the east slope. There'd been reports of a downed tree blocking the path, so I brought the little UTV out, parked it just before the narrowing, and hiked the rest. About a mile in, Maisie stopped dead. She didn't growl or bark, just froze. One paw up, ears forward, staring into the trees off the right side of the trail. I thought maybe she'd spotted a deer, but she didn't move. Didn't sniff. Just stood there. I gave her a nudge with my boot. "Come on," I said. Nothing. Then I noticed the birds had gone quiet. It's one of those things you don't pick up on at first, just this heavy, blank silence. No wind, no insects, no distant woodpeckers, just nothing. I looked where she was looking. Nothing there. Just dark trees, a little underbrush, some moss-covered boulders. I took a few steps to the tree line and she backed up. Full body back pedal, tail down. I'd never seen her do that before. Not with bears, not with snakes. I said her name again, quieter this time. She sat down in the middle of the trail and wouldn't go any farther. I figured maybe there was a scent she didn't like, so I clipped her leash on and left her tied to a trail marker while I walked a bit further in to clear my head. That part of the forest, about 20 yards past where she stopped, felt different. It's hard to explain. The air was still but thick, like walking into a room right after someone's been in a fight. The trees looked the same, but the light changed. Like the sky dimmed slightly, even though there weren't any clouds. I walked maybe another 50 feet in before I realized something else. No tracks. No birds, no squirrels, no broken branches, no scat. The ground was undisturbed. I don't just mean no people, I mean nothing. Like nothing had walked through that patch of forest in a long time. I crouched down and touched the soil. It wasn't frozen, but it felt wrong. Too dry. Like the top layer had been cooked and then left to sit. I stood up, and that's when I heard it. A low clicking sound from deeper in the trees. Not fast, not loud, like tapping 2 pieces of plastic together, maybe 6 or 7 times in a row. Then a pause. Then again. It wasn't mechanical. It didn't echo. It just sat there in the stillness. I called out, thinking maybe someone was off trail. Hey, Park Service, anyone out there? No response. The clicking stopped. I waited about a minute, then turned and started back toward Maisie. Except when I got back to the trail, she was gone. I panicked, obviously. Started yelling her name, spinning in circles trying to pick a direction. Then I heard her bark, just once, sharp and distant, from back the way I'd come. I bolted into the trees, straight toward the sound, and found her standing dead still at the edge of that same zone, right where the quiet started. She hadn't gone in. She was looking into it like she was tracking something, but she wouldn't cross the line. I called her again, and this time she ran to me. Full sprint. Her back was wet, just her back. No puddles nearby, no rain. I ran my hand along her fur, and it came away smelling like copper and pine sap, but thicker. Almost like tar. We got out of there fast. Back at the station, I logged the route and marked the area for follow-up. Told myself maybe there was a predator carcass nearby, putting her off. Maybe the soil was weird because of old fire damage. I didn't really believe it, but it gave me something to write. 2 days later, I went back. No Maisie that time. I left her with my neighbor. I brought a trail cam, some survey flags, a fresh GPS. The birds went quiet in the exact same spot. Same dead zone. Not a twig moved inside that line. I stopped at the edge, turned on the camera, and walked in. About 30 feet in, the GPS went nuts. Screen froze, coordinates blinked 0. I turned it off and back on, still nothing. Even the compass stopped turning. Then the clicking started again. This time it was closer. Still that same measured rhythm, tick, 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 tick. But it wasn't moving. Just coming from one fixed point ahead, maybe behind a clump of trees. I raised the camera and took a few photos, but the display stayed black. Not glitched, just black. Like the lens cap was on, but it wasn't. I backed out. Slowly. As soon as I crossed back over the line, the GPS came back online. The camera worked. Birds started up again. I filed a report and flagged the trail as temporarily closed due to unstable terrain. It wasn't true, but I didn't know how else to keep people out. The forest supervisor said they'd send someone to check it out, but I never heard if they did. I checked the logs every week. No one else patrolled that section. No one assigned it after me. A month later, I took a different trail that skirts the southern edge of that area. Maisie was with me again. She was fine all day, normal energy, nose to the ground. Then we got close to that stretch. She stopped again. Same spot, different angle. Just sat and stared toward the trees. This time, when I crouched next to her, I noticed the sound before anything else. Complete silence. And then the clicking. Only now it was above us. Same rhythm, but from higher up. Not trees creaking, not birds. Just clicks, like something tracking from the canopy, even though nothing moved. We turned around. Neither of us ran, but I kept my hand on her collar the whole way back to the truck. I haven't gone near that part of the preserve since. It's still marked closed. No animals ever show up on the trail cams near there. I moved one as close as I could get without crossing that line. Caught footage of a fox approaching, sniffing the air, then turning around and leaving. Happened 3 times with different animals. None of them crossed the line. Not one. And it's like something's there that the rest of us just weren't meant to find. I got up that morning around 4:40. I usually wake up early without an alarm, but that day I'd slept hard and woke up kind of disoriented, like I'd come out of a really deep nap. The sky was still dark and everything felt a little off. I remember the way the light from the hallway looked under the bedroom door, sort of dimmer than usual, just strange. I threw on boots and a hoodie and went out like I always do, just to check on the cows and make sure nothing had gotten into the pasture overnight. It's something I've done for 20 years, same order every day. Coffee, boots, check the field. When I opened the back door and stepped onto the porch, it was dead quiet. No birds, no bugs, not even the usual rustle of wind through the trees. It had rained lightly the day before, so I expected the ground to be soft, but it was bone dry, like it hadn't rained in a week. I remember squatting down and rubbing a patch of dirt between my fingers just to make sure. The pasture's behind the barn, maybe a 1/4 acre of open grass and a couple of feed troughs. We've got 15 head of cattle, nothing huge. I didn't see them at first because it was still dark, but when I turned the corner of the barn, I stopped cold. They were all standing in the middle of the field, not grazing, not lying down, not even moving, just standing still. All 15, in a loose line, facing the same direction. Not perfectly straight, but enough that it caught my attention right away. They weren't making any noise. Usually they huff or shift their weight, swish their tails. These were frozen. I stood there for maybe a full minute waiting for one of them to move, and none of them did. Their ears weren't even flicking. At first I thought maybe they were spooked by something, but there was nothing around. No signs of a coyote or dogs. I walked a little closer, slow, and whistled like I always do. They didn't react. Then I noticed the weather vane on top of the barn was spinning. Not fast, just a slow, steady turn. Things usually stiff as hell, rusted in place unless we get a big storm. And there was no wind, not even a breeze. It was spinning counterclockwise. I just stood there staring at it, then back at the cows. I walked into the field a little more, maybe 30 feet in, and that's when I felt it. This pressure in my chest, like when you're underwater and the weight builds. Not painful, but heavy. Everything felt slow. My footsteps, the air, even the sound of gravel crunching under my boots, all of it felt half a second behind. The cows didn't budge. I called out to them, louder this time. Still nothing. No blinking, no tail swish, just staring. That's when I noticed they weren't facing north. They were angled slightly east, maybe east-northeast if I had to guess. I only knew that because the sun was just barely starting to tint the sky behind them. I backed out of the field and went into the barn. I grabbed a flashlight and checked the feed area, the grain bins, the fence line. No breaks, no tracks. Everything looked fine. Even the cows' water troughs were still full, no signs of anything stirred or spilled. When I came back out, the vane had stopped spinning. It wasn't pointing the same direction it had been before. It was facing west now, still no wind. I started to feel a little sick. Not nausea exactly, just uneasy, like my insides were buzzing. I remember putting my hand on the side of the barn to steady myself, and it felt warmer than it should have. Not hot, but definitely warmer than the air around it. Then one of the cows moved. Not all of them, just one near the center. It took one step forward and let out this low, rough grunt, like it had just woken up. Then another followed, and another. Within maybe 30 seconds, they were all shifting around, looking in different directions, starting to graze again like nothing had happened. I stood there watching them, and for a second I felt completely alone. Not just physically, I mean really alone. Like nothing else in the world was awake yet. I checked my phone. It said 5:07. I don't know how long I'd been standing out there, but it felt like maybe 10 minutes tops since I walked outside. It was weird enough that I went inside and wrote the time down on a sticky note, just in case I forgot or second-guessed it later. I didn't tell my wife right away. She's not the type to jump to conclusions, but I figured she'd just say the cows got spooked by an animal or something. I thought maybe I'd convince myself it was weirder than it really was. But then, later that afternoon, I noticed one more thing. I was filling the horse's water trough by the shed when I saw a mark on the grass near the far end of the pasture. At first it looked like a patch of dead grass, but when I walked over, I saw it was this perfect oval. Not a burn mark exactly, just flattened, like something heavy had been set down and then lifted off without dragging. The grass was bent inward from all directions. There were no tracks leading to or from it, just the oval. About 8 feet across, maybe 4 wide. Dead center in the part of the field the cows had been staring at. I didn't touch it, just looked at it and walked away. That night, I stayed up late, watching the pasture through the window. Nothing happened. No strange lights, no odd sounds, no more frozen cows. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, the mark was still there. The cows avoided it. They'd graze right up to the edge and then veer away. I walked through it once. The grass crunched under my boots like it had been sun-dried, but it hadn't been hot that day. The air above it felt slightly cooler than the rest of the field, but only for a second. Could have been nothing. It faded over the next week. By the 6th day, it was barely visible. But I still noticed the cows never stood there. I kept checking the weather vane every morning for about a month. It didn't spin again. No idea what happened, but I started keeping a notebook after that. Just dates and weird stuff, sounds, lights, animals acting off. Nothing since then's been quite like that morning, though. Nothing even close. We'd been at the cabin for a few days, just the three of us. Me, my wife, and our son, Jake. It's out in the middle of nowhere, really remote. No cell service, just the kind of place where you drive for miles through dense woods to get there. We liked it for the quiet, away from everything. The plan was to disconnect, relax, and let Jake run around without worry. The first couple of nights were normal, nothing weird. Just the usual sounds, crickets, wind in the trees, the occasional owl. But the third night, something happened that I've been trying to figure out ever since. We were sitting outside around the fire pit. Jake was roasting marshmallows, and my wife and I were just talking, sipping some coffee. The sky was clear, and the stars were bright because there's no light pollution out there. It was peaceful, exactly what we came for. Suddenly, out of nowhere, my wife pointed toward the trees on the far edge of the clearing and said, "What's that?" I looked where she was pointing, toward the thick line of firs and pines that bordered the cabin. At first, I saw nothing but darkness. Then, slowly, a light appeared, a small, glowing sphere rising just above the treetops. It wasn't like any flashlight or lantern. It was smooth, perfectly round, and emitted a soft, steady light that was white but kind of bluish at the edges. The sphere moved up, inch by inch, about 50 feet above us, just hovering there. There was no noise. No buzzing, no humming, nothing. I swear I strained to hear something, but it was completely silent except for the crackling of the fire behind me. I blinked, thinking maybe I was seeing things. My wife looked just as confused, and Jake stopped mid-toast with his marshmallow, staring wide-eyed. The sphere didn't change shape or size, it just hung there, still. We didn't move or speak for maybe a minute. I felt my stomach knot up, not in a panic, but in that slow, creeping kind of unease. The kind where your body wants to run, but your mind is stuck trying to make sense of what it's seeing. Then, without warning, it shot straight up, like a bullet. I mean, really fast, faster than anything I've ever seen. It vanished into the sky in a blink, leaving no trail, no noise, nothing. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone. We all just sat there, stunned. I looked at my watch. Only about 30 seconds had passed since it appeared. But something felt off, like time wasn't right. After a moment, Jake whispered, "Did you see that?" My wife nodded, but she looked pale. "What was that?" I had no answer. Later, inside the cabin, we tried to shake it off, but the weirdness didn't end that night. The next day, Jake found some strange marks in the dirt near the cabin's edge. They were circular, about 2 feet wide, like something had been pressed into the ground. No footprints, no signs of a person or animal dragging something, just these perfectly round indentations, spaced unevenly, leading toward the woods. We thought maybe a heavy branch fell or something, but the circles were too precise, and there was no broken wood around. That night, I woke up around 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep. Something outside felt different. I went to the window and looked out. The forest was still, but in the distance, I saw a faint light flickering like a glow behind the trees, too small and too steady to be a campfire. I kept watching, and it moved slowly along the tree line, just below the canopy, never breaking through the branches. It didn't blink or change color, just moved in this smooth, gliding way. I called my wife quietly, but when she looked, the light was gone. I thought maybe it was my imagination, but I didn't feel right going back to bed. By the third night, the air felt heavy, like something was watching. We all stayed close together, the fire burning brighter than before. Then, again, that sphere appeared. Same place, same silent rise above the trees. Only this time, it stayed longer, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. I noticed it pulse gently, the light thickening and thinning in waves, almost like it was breathing. Jake whispered, "It's watching us." I wanted to say it wasn't, that it was just a weird light. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. When it finally shot up and disappeared again, my wife said, "Let's pack up tomorrow." We didn't talk much after that, just packed silently the next day. Driving away, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the sphere again. But the sky was empty. I don't know what we saw or why it was there. But something about those nights made the woods feel less like home and more like a place you're not supposed to be. It's been months since then, and sometimes when it's quiet, I swear I still see a faint glow just beyond the trees outside my window. I've been flying drones for a few years now, mostly just for fun and the occasional sunset shot. Nothing professional, just a quadcopter, a DJI Phantom 4 I saved up for, and a basic camera. I live in a small town out in eastern Oregon, near the Blue Mountains, and the scenery around here is exactly the kind of place drone folks dream about. Wide open skies, ridges, dense pine forests, and hardly anyone around. One Saturday afternoon in late September, the weather was perfect for flying. Clear skies, just a little crisp in the air as fall was starting to settle in, but still warm enough in the sun. I decided to take the drone up near a ridge I'd been wanting to check out for months. It's called Devil's Peak by locals, though I'm not superstitious or anything. I just like the way the trees thin out near the top, and the view of the valley from there is supposed to be killer. I got my gear ready around 3 p.m., packed a small backpack with extra batteries, and called my dog, a husky mix named Rook, to come with me. He's usually a little skittish around the drone, but he loves hikes and sniffing around the forest, so I figured he'd keep me company. The trail up to the ridge isn't too long, maybe a mile or so, mostly uphill with some steep patches. Rook bounded ahead like usual, stopping to poke his nose in the brush. When I got to a clearing a little below the ridge, I set up the drone on a flat rock and turned on the controller. Everything seemed normal. I did a quick check on the signal strength and battery percentage. Perfect. I started the motors, and the quadcopter lifted off smoothly, hovering for a moment to stabilize. Then I guided it slowly toward the ridge crest. That's when the trouble started. At first, the drone climbed steadily, maybe 300 feet above the ground, and the live feed on my phone was crisp. I could see the tops of the trees spreading out below, and beyond them, the winding river in the valley. I kept adjusting the camera, trying to frame the ridgeline against the clear blue sky. Then, just as the drone got about 100 feet past the ridge top, the feed went static. The image froze on the screen, nothing but a patch of sky with a vague, pale curve cutting across it. I tapped the screen, restarted the feed, even cycled the connection on the controller. Nothing changed. The drone was still there, hovering somewhere beyond the ridge, but I couldn't see anything. Then the controller started beeping. The signal was weak and dropping fast. I tried moving around, climbing a bit higher on the trail, waving my arms to clear the line of sight. The beeping got faster, the connection worse, and then the drone suddenly started drifting back the way it came, unresponsive to my commands. I called it back manually as best I could, but it was like it had a mind of its own. It flew low and slow, coming back toward me but veering erratically, like it was buffeted by wind. There wasn't much wind, the trees were almost still, so it felt off. The signal dropped completely a few times, and I lost control entirely for a moment or two. Then, after about 5 minutes of this, the drone finally touched down roughly 20 feet away from me. I rushed over to grab it. The body looked intact, no scratches or dents. The camera lens was clear, no smudges or cracks. I turned it off, then back on, hoping to check the footage immediately, but the app said no recordings were saved. I thought that was weird, but I figured maybe the crash landing corrupted the files. I packed everything up and started hiking back down with Rook. The sun was starting to dip lower behind the trees, turning the forest a dimmer shade of gold. I felt uneasy, but told myself it was just tech acting up. Back home, I plugged the drone into my laptop and started the data transfer. It took a while, all the flight logs, telemetry, and video files, but when I finally opened the camera folder, there was only one file. A single still frame. It was that pale curve I saw frozen on the controller screen. The photo was out of focus, just sky and a faint metallic arc that didn't match anything natural. No other frames, no video, just that one picture. I stared at it for a long time. It looked like some kind of structure, smooth and reflective, but it was impossible to tell what it really was or how close. The sky behind it was clear blue, no clouds or anything. Didn't look like any airplane wing or drone part I've seen. The weirdest thing was the timestamps on the flight logs. According to them, the drone was out for nearly 4 hours. That made no sense. I remember being on the trail for maybe an hour tops. I checked my watch, and it lined up with my memory. I was definitely at the ridge around 3:15 and back at the car by 4:20. There was no way the drone had been flying for 4 hours, and if it had been somewhere out there for that long, why did it come back by itself? And why was there only that one weird image? I kept replaying the day in my head. After losing control, I'd been focused on getting back before dark. No time for looking around or waiting for the drone to return. I asked a couple friends if they'd seen any military exercises or drone tests in the area that day, but no one knew anything. That night, I charged the drone again and tried flying it in my backyard. Everything was normal. The controls worked perfectly, the feed was clear, and the camera recorded fine. The glitches and lost signal only happened near the ridge. I told a local hiking group about the experience, half joking, and one guy said maybe the ridge had some sort of magnetic anomaly or interference. I looked it up later. The Blue Mountains have some known spots with strange compass readings, but nothing concrete or well documented. The strangest thing was what happened the next day. I went back to the ridge in the morning to look for anything unusual. The trail was empty and the forest was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy. I climbed to the top and scanned the sky carefully. Nothing. No lights, no hum, no drone. But when I checked the place where the drone landed the day before, the grass was bent flat in a circle about 10 feet wide. The earth was soft and damp from recent rain, and there were no footprints or tire tracks around. Just that perfect, smooth patch of trampled grass. I swear I stood there for a solid 15 minutes, just staring at that circle. The rest of the forest was untouched. No fallen branches, no animal tracks. It was like the ground had been pressed down evenly, but nothing else nearby showed any sign of disturbance. I took pictures with my phone, but the photos looked normal, no strange shadows or lights. I've been back to the ridge a few times since, flying the drone and hiking around, but I've never gotten close to that circle again. Rook won't go near it either. He growls softly whenever I try to coax him. The drone still works fine, no more lost signals or corrupted footage, but I don't know what happened that day near the ridge. That pale metallic curve in the sky, the hours-long flight according to the logs, the trampled circle on the ground, none of it adds up. I keep thinking about that curve, about what it could have been. A piece of something huge, just out of reach, something that didn't want me to see it clearly. I don't know if anyone else has ever noticed anything strange up there, but for me, that day changed how I see the mountains. There's something watching or waiting just beyond the trees, and maybe it's better not to get too close. I was out in my backyard, about 10 miles outside of Flagstaff, Arizona, just like I do most clear nights. I've been into amateur astronomy for years, nothing fancy, just a decent telescope and a DSLR camera on a tripod. That night, it was a dry, cool evening with almost no wind, perfect for stargazing. I had my border collie Scout with me. He's usually more interested in chasing rabbits, but that night he seemed calm, just lying near my feet. I was testing some new camera settings on the tripod, trying to capture the Milky Way. After an hour or so of fiddling, I put the telescope away and decided to just watch the sky with my naked eyes for a bit. Then, around 11:17 p.m., something caught my attention. A really bright light moving across the sky, roughly west to east. At first, I thought it was a satellite, or maybe the International Space Station, but it was moving differently. The light was steady, no blinking, and pretty intense, brighter than any plane or satellite I'd seen in years of stargazing. I grabbed my camera, aimed it toward the light, and started recording. What was odd was how smooth it moved. No blinking lights, no noise at all. The neighborhood was quiet except for Scout's occasional sigh. I kept my eyes on the light through my camera's screen. Then it did something weird. Instead of continuing its path across the sky, it just stopped. Just froze mid-flight. No slowing down, no hesitation, just stopped. It held its position for maybe 5 seconds. Then, without any warning, it shot straight up, almost straight up from the horizon toward the zenith. It accelerated insanely fast, way faster than any commercial or military aircraft I know of. There was no contrail, no sound, no sonic boom, nothing. I was blinking, not quite believing what I was seeing. Scout looked up too, ears perked but didn't bark or run. The light disappeared into the darkness above the stars in maybe 2 seconds. I lowered the camera and stared for a long time. The sky was empty again, except for the usual stars. The whole thing probably lasted less than a minute, but I kept looking for any sign of the light coming back. Later, I checked the footage on my laptop. The brightness and the way the light moved were clear. I zoomed in as much as I could, but there was no shape around the light, no wings, no tail, no structure, just a bright point moving on its own. I thought maybe it was a drone, but I've never seen anything fly that fast, that high, without noise or blinking navigation lights. Military jets make noise for miles, and missiles or rockets leave trails and explosions. This had none of those. Over the next few days, I asked some friends who work at the local airport and the university's astronomy club if they saw anything similar. Nothing. The FAA flight tracker showed no flights matching that path or time. The weirdest part is the way it stopped and then went straight up without any sound or visible acceleration effects. I replayed that moment on the video over and over. The light just hung there, like it was suspended by something invisible, then zipped up like it was weightless. I double-checked the camera settings and timestamp. Everything was normal. The GPS clock on the camera matched my phone's time. Scout has been acting strange since then. He won't come into the backyard after dark, and sometimes he stares up at the sky for minutes, low growling and stiff-legged. That's not like him at all. I still go out stargazing, but I haven't seen anything like that light again. And honestly, I don't know what to make of it. It didn't feel threatening or ominous, just odd. I keep telling myself there must be some logical explanation, maybe a new kind of experimental aircraft, but nobody will tell me anything. The FAA folks just shrug. Whatever it wasn't like anything I've seen before. Just a bright, silent light moving on its own terms, stopping, then vanishing straight up into the sky like it didn't belong here. I don't have answers. Just that footage and the memory of a night that didn't add up. We were camped about 15 miles outside of Black Butte, New Mexico, not too far from the edge of that restricted zone everyone in town sort of pretends doesn't exist. You can see the fences if you drive far enough off Highway 14, low and dusty, with rusted signs that say things like "No entry" and "U.S. government property." The kind of place that doesn't bother with cameras because nobody's supposed to be out there anyway. My girlfriend, Lacey, had found the campsite on some overlanding forum. Flat patch near an arroyo, good for stargazing, little risk of traffic. We drove out in my old Tacoma with the tent in the truck bed, her dog Hubble in the backseat. He's a blue heeler mix with a busted left ear and a weird habit of staring off into empty space sometimes. We got there just before sunset. Mid-June, hot even after dark. Dry wind, no clouds. We cooked dinner on the little propane burner, beans and tortillas, nothing fancy. No phone signal out there, but that's part of why we went. Just us, the dog, and the quiet. Around 10:30, we climbed up into the tent. You could still hear the metal popping from the truck cooling down. Hubble curled up between us on top of the sleeping bags. The plan was to wake up early and hike along one of the dry riverbeds before it got too hot. I remember waking up once in the night to take a piss. Stars were still out. Sky was so clear it looked fake, like paper with holes punched through it. I stood behind the truck to get some cover from the wind, but it was dead still. Just warm and quiet and open in every direction. I didn't notice anything weird then. The weird stuff started when we woke up. It was maybe 6:30 in the morning. Sky already turning white-blue, not a cloud anywhere. I unzipped the tent and noticed right away that the truck doors were open. All 4 of them. Just wide open, like someone had parked and forgotten to close anything. Driver, passenger, both rear doors. At first, I figured I'd somehow forgotten to lock them, and maybe the wind caught one and it swung the others open, but there was no wind. And even if I'd left one door ajar, I definitely hadn't left all 4 wide open like that. Lacey leaned over me and said, "Did you get something from the truck last night?" I said no. She shook her head slowly and pulled on her boots. Hubble jumped down and started pacing circles in the dirt near the front bumper, nose low to the ground. Then he just stopped, sat, and stared at the open passenger door like he was waiting for something to come out of it. I walked around the truck. Seats were untouched, nothing missing. Cooler was still full, glove box closed, Nothing torn or broken. The keys were still in my bag in the tent. But the ground around the truck was completely smooth, just our footprints from the day before. No fresh prints, no tire marks, no drag marks, no animal tracks, nothing. It was sand, not hard-packed dirt. Anything heavier than a rabbit would have left something. Even Hubble's prints from that morning stood out clear. But around the truck, nothing. Lacey checked the cooler and said, "Even the food's still here." We both just stood there for a while. I kept looking up like I expected to see something above us. A drone, a balloon, whatever. There was nothing, just that still blue sky. We broke camp pretty fast after that, didn't even cook breakfast, I just wanted to get moving. But as I was rolling up the tent, I saw something off in the distance, maybe 200 yards east near the edge of the arroyo. There was a post sticking out of the sand. Just a wooden fence post, maybe 3 feet high. Looked like part of an old ranch line or something. I walked over to check it out. It wasn't old. The wood looked new, like freshly cut, no weathering, no cracks, and it was stuck in the ground at an angle, like it had been jammed in quick. At the top, someone had wrapped a strip of what looked like tin foil around it. Not commercial foil, rough cut, like it had been torn by hand. I didn't touch it. I just looked at it for a minute and then walked back. We left by 7:15. Halfway back to the highway, Lacey asked if I remembered hearing anything in the night. I said no, but she said she'd woken up once. Thought she heard a humming sound. Said it was really low, like far-off machinery or an electrical transformer buzzing. She thought it was just in her head, so she didn't wake me. Hubble wouldn't settle down the whole drive home. Usually he sleeps the second we start moving, but this time he sat upright in the back seat, staring out the window. Every so often he'd let out this low, short whine, just one at a time. Back in town, we checked the truck. Doors worked fine. Locks clicked, no issues with the latches, nothing missing, not even the gas. But the dome light was burned out. Not dim, burned. The little plastic cover over the bulb was cracked down the middle, and the bulb itself had this faint black smear inside it, like it had popped. That night we slept at Lacey's place. Around 2 a.m., Hubble started pacing. He'd walk from the front door to the bedroom, then back again. No barking, just quiet and tense. I looked through the blinds expecting to see a raccoon or something, but there was nothing. When I came back from the window, I noticed something else. The backpack I'd brought on the trip, same one that had the keys in it, was sitting in the corner. It had a line of sand across the top zipper. Just one line, like someone had dragged a finger through fine dirt and traced it across the fabric. I hadn't taken it out since we got back. It had stayed zipped and untouched by the door. I didn't say anything to Lacey, just brushed the sand off and shoved the pack in the closet. A couple days later, I drove by the entrance to that old service road we'd used to get to the campsite. There were fresh tire tracks there. Not ours, these were wider, deeper. Like a heavier vehicle had gone in after us. I didn't follow them. We haven't camped in that area since. I was working the night shift at a storage facility on the outskirts of Lincoln, Nebraska last fall. My name's Jake. I'd taken the job because I'd recently moved back home after college, and it was steady enough to cover bills while I figured out what to do next. The place was mostly quiet, a bunch of metal storage units lined up behind a chain link fence, and a handful of security cameras feeding to a monitor in the office where I sat. It was about 2:15 a.m. on a Tuesday when I noticed something that didn't add up. The night had been calm. The usual hum from the streetlights, a distant dog barking, maybe once or twice, but otherwise, nothing. I was scrolling through footage on the monitor, killing time, when out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move in the parking lot through the big front window. At first, I thought it was just a shadow from a passing car's headlights. But there weren't any cars around, and the lot was empty except for a few trailers. I stood up, looked out through the glass, nothing there, just empty asphalt lit by those orange streetlights. I sat back down, feeling a little dumb for getting jumpy, and kept watching the monitors. Then it happened again. This time, the shadow was sharper. It moved fast, a flicker, low and wide, just on the far edge of the lot by the fence. It didn't look like any animal I'd seen, too big and oddly shaped. The weird part was that there were no lights anywhere near it, No headlights, no flashlight, no glow at all. It was just a dark, dark shape moving like it was sucking up the light around it. I tried to shake it off and went outside to check. The night was unusually cold for October. There was this strange breeze, but it didn't feel natural. Usually when the wind picks up, it rustles the leaves, rattles the chain link fence, maybe kicks up some dust. But this breeze was silent. It didn't move anything. It just kind of hung in the air, cold and still. Walking around the parking lot, I kept looking for whatever the shadow had been. No footprints, no signs of anyone or anything. The trailers were locked up tight, no gaps or places someone could hide. It was just me, the cold, and that eerie feeling that I wasn't alone. Back inside, I tried to get back to work. The security system was mostly automated, but every now and then, I had to run checks or respond to alarms. That night, nothing went off, but every so often I caught a glimpse of that shadow on the monitors, always darting just out of full view. It never came close to the cameras, just enough to be noticed. Then around 3:20 a.m., everything went quiet. I don't mean the usual quiet of night shifts. I mean like the world itself stopped making noise. The hum of the lights, the buzz of the fridge in the office, even the ticking of the clock on the wall, it all faded away. I looked out the window and saw the parking lot in complete stillness, bathed in that dull orange light. The wind was gone, the shadows frozen. Then, across the lot near the fence, a shape moved again. This time I saw it clearly, but it wasn't a person, at least not like a human. It was dark, maybe 6 feet tall, but the shape was wrong. The edges blurred, like it was bending or melting into the night. It didn't have features, no eyes, no face, no limbs I could make out. Just a blackness against the orange light. The weirdest part was how the air around it looked. It was like the heat was sucked out of a small patch of the night. I felt the cold hit me suddenly, a drop in temperature that felt deeper than the fall air. I wanted to call someone, but my phone was dead, no signal. I tried blinking, hoping it was a trick of tired eyes or shadows. When I looked back, the figure was gone. The air warmed up again, the sounds of the night slowly returned. The buzz in the office kicked back in. I sat down hard, hands shaking a bit, trying to figure out what I'd just seen. I wanted to convince myself it was a shadow, or maybe a trick with the streetlights and the fence, but it felt too real, like it was watching me. I finished my shift without anything else happening. I didn't see the shape again, and the cameras showed nothing unusual. When I told the day manager what happened, he just nodded and said, "Storage facilities attract weird stuff at night." I laughed it off, but inside I wasn't so sure. That's the thing. I don't know what it was. No footsteps, no noise, just that cold presence and the black shape moving across the parking lot. Every night since then, I keep expecting to see it again, but it hasn't come back. Sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I swear I feel like something's watching me from the shadows, but whenever I turn around, there's nothing there. Maybe it was just me. Maybe not. Either way, that night at the storage lot is one of those things I can't quite explain. It was late September when I took the Cessna up from Red Bluff. I'd been flying since college, nothing fancy, just small single-engine stuff, mostly for weekend trips or clearing my head. That Sunday I had the afternoon free, weather looked good, and I figured I'd take a short hop up north over the valley before sunset. Clear skies, light wind, visibility for miles. I filed VFR, took off around 4:40 p.m., just a quick loop, Red Bluff to Lake Shasta and back. Nothing unusual. About 30 minutes in, I was cruising at 6,500 feet, just west of Lassen. Air was smooth. Not much traffic on the radio. I was listening to NorCal Approach in case anyone was nearby, but the chatter was light. The sun was low but still above the tree line, lighting up the clouds from underneath in that soft orange way it does in late summer. That's when I noticed something above me, maybe a few hundred feet higher. Looked like another aircraft, coming up from behind, just slightly offset to my left. At first I thought it was a twin, maybe a Baron or a Piper Navajo, something with a narrow fuselage. Hard to tell with the sun behind it. But what caught my attention was the way it was flying. It wasn't passing me, it was pacing me. I slowed a bit, brought the throttle back just to see, and whatever it was adjusted with me, kept the exact same relative distance. Not gaining, not falling back, just hovering up there. Maybe 500 feet higher, maybe less. I couldn't hear anything over my own engine, but it wasn't making any noise that I could detect. I called it out on the radio. Unidentified traffic, 11 o'clock high, type unknown, altitude unverified. No response. No acknowledgement from ATC or anyone on frequency. I looked up again. The shape was still there. Silhouette was weird. It didn't have visible wings, not like a fixed wing should. The body looked smooth, almost like it was molded. No rivets, no joints. And the way it was flying didn't make sense. No attitude change, no roll. Just this perfect horizontal movement, matching me inch for inch. I kept watching it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It wasn't wobbling, no yaw, no buffeting from turbulence. Just solid. Almost too solid. I tried to get a better angle, banked gently right, thinking maybe the sun was tricking my eyes. But as I turned, it shifted too. Same bank, same arc, staying high and left. Perfectly mirrored. That's when I started to feel it. Something was wrong. Not with the plane. Instruments were solid, engine was fine, but there was this pressure, like cabin pressure droplet, even though I wasn't climbing. My ears popped once, then again, even though my altitude hadn't changed more than 50 feet. And the radio started hissing. Not loud, just a soft static under the squelch, even when I turned the volume down. I looked up again. That's when it flipped. It didn't bank, it didn't roll, it just rotated. 1 second it was level above me, matching my heading. The next, it pivoted, nose down, tail up, but stayed perfectly still in space, like gravity didn't apply. It wasn't falling, it wasn't climbing, just standing on its tail in midair. And then it vanished. No sound, no acceleration, no vapor trail, just gone. I scanned the sky, turned in a wide circle, even climbed another 300 feet to look for anything. Contrail, reflection, movement. Nothing, just clouds above, the orange sun, and a completely empty sky. I keyed up again. NorCal approach? This is November 289er Echo. I had visual contact with unknown traffic at approximately 600-700 feet, positioned southwest of Lassen, faded out of sight. No collision risk, continuing VFR. They didn't respond right away. About 10 seconds later, a different controller voice came on and asked me to repeat. I did. They told me they had no primary or secondary radar contact in my area other than me. I continued the loop back, tried to brush it off. But on the way down, I kept checking the mirrors, kept glancing out the side windows, expecting something else to appear. I couldn't get the movement out of my head, how unnatural it had looked when it flipped. It wasn't aerodynamic. It wasn't possible, not by any standard I knew. I landed around 6:10 p.m., still light out. Parked, tied down, logged the flight. Normal flight time, no mechanical issues. Nothing technically happened, so I didn't file a report. I didn't even tell anyone about it for a few days. But for weeks afterward, every time I went up, I kept scanning the sky for something following me. And I kept thinking about how that thing knew exactly where I was. How it mimicked every little turn, every small speed change. Like it wasn't flying near me. Like it was watching. I worked the graveyard shift at a small convenience store on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just the usual late-night stuff, restocking shelves, watching the cameras, and hoping the quiet lasts. This happened a few months ago, maybe late spring, when the days start getting longer but the nights still feel cold and empty. It was just past midnight when I first noticed the light. I was standing by the front window, wiping down the counter, and out of the corner of my eye, I caught something blinking behind the tree line that borders the parking lot. It was a single red light, nothing like the usual car brake lights or street lamps. The weird thing was how steady it was, blinking on and off in the exact same spot every 10 seconds. I counted. 1 blink, pause, blink, pause, like a metronome. At first, I thought it was a car parked just beyond the trees, maybe someone fishing or camping nearby, but the parking lot was empty and the road out front was dead. I stepped outside, walked over to the edge of the lot where the trees started, trying to see through the branches, but the light was too deep in the woods to spot anything else. No sounds, no movement, just the red blinking light, glowing faintly between the trunks. I went back inside, thinking maybe it was some kind of hunting light or someone using a flashlight to signal. But the timing was too exact, too deliberate. It didn't feel random. The clock ticked on. Every 10 seconds, the light blinked again. I started timing it with my phone. 10 seconds, 10 seconds, always the same. It didn't speed up or slow down. It stayed perfectly regular for nearly half an hour. I tried not to stare, but it was impossible. I kept watching it from behind the counter, feeling a strange mix of curiosity and something else. Something tight, like my chest was getting squeezed. I tried calling my friend on a break, but no answer. Texted her a quick message about the blinking light, but didn't get a reply. Then, suddenly, the light moved. It didn't slide sideways or jump around like I expected. It shot straight up. Like someone flicked a switch, it started rising vertically, fast, cutting through the dark tree line. I saw it clearly against the night sky, climbing higher and higher until it vanished somewhere above the clouds. There was no noise, no engine hum, no crackle or buzz. Just that red dot rising like a flare, getting smaller and smaller, then gone. I stood frozen for a minute, not sure if I'd imagined it. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, looked back toward the trees, but the light was definitely gone. No blinking, no flicker, no sign it had ever been there. I thought about calling the cops or someone, but who would believe me? A blinking red light that moves straight up and disappears? Sounds like something from a movie. I clocked back in, trying to focus on my work, but the whole night felt off. I kept glancing out the window, half expecting the light to come back or see something moving in the shadows. A couple of hours later, near closing time, I heard it. Soft footsteps on the gravel outside. Slow, deliberate. I looked up from the counter, but the lot was empty. No cars, no people. I stepped outside, heart pounding a little, and scanned the edge of the trees. Nothing. Just dark shapes and the rustle of wind through leaves. I didn't want to stick around anymore. Grabbed my things, locked the doors early, and got in my car. As I backed out of the lot, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a second, I thought I saw a faint red glow near the tree line, but when I looked again, it was gone. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. It was my friend finally replying, "Sorry, fell asleep. Everything okay?" I wanted to tell her, but the words felt strange coming out loud. I just said yeah. When I got home, I double-checked the security footage from the store. The cameras didn't pick up the light at all. Not a flicker. The timestamp showed the usual empty parking lot, nothing unusual. That was the weirdest part. If it was real, why didn't the cameras see it? I still think about that light sometimes. The steady blinking, the way it rose silently and vanished. I don't know what it was, or why I was the only one who saw it that night, but I know it was there, somewhere just beyond the trees, watching. I was hiking with my buddy Kevin near Fort Huachuca, down in southern Arizona. This was last March, early spring. The weather was perfect, cool in the shade, warm in the sun. We'd been out a few times that season, but this trail was new to us. It was just outside the restricted zone, technically public land, but pretty remote. Kevin's the type who likes to get close to fences and see what kind of signs he can spot. He doesn't mess with them, just likes the vibe, I guess. We parked off a dirt service road around 10:30 in the morning, hiked in maybe 3 miles before we stopped for lunch. No cell service, which was expected. Kevin had downloaded offline maps, and I had a Garmin for backup. We were sitting on this rocky ridge overlooking a long wash. The land was empty. Just chaparral, low brush, and the occasional mesquite. You could see clear out to the Dragoon Mountains on one side and the base perimeter way off to the other. At some point after lunch, we noticed it had gotten really quiet. No wind, no bugs. That wasn't too weird. It happens sometimes when the sun's high, but the air felt weirdly thick. I don't know how else to say it. Like that moment before a monsoon, only the sky was clear. We were packing up when my Garmin screen went black. Kevin looked up and said, "My phone just died." I thought he meant battery died, but he still had like 80%. He pressed the power button and nothing happened. My Garmin wouldn't respond either. We pulled out our backup phones. Kevin carries an old flip phone for emergencies, and even that was dead. No power, no flicker, no restart logo. Like the batteries were just gone. We stood there for a while, just kind of confused. No electronics were working. We tried our watches, dead. My little pocket flashlight, nothing. Kevin even pulled out his camera, an old Nikon he brings sometimes. Wouldn't turn on. Then we heard this low sound. Not loud, barely audible, but deep. It wasn't wind or a plane. It felt more like pressure than noise. A low hum that came in waves. I asked Kevin if he felt it or heard it, and he just nodded. We didn't move. I don't know why. I think we were both trying to stay calm, like we were waiting for it to stop. It did, maybe 5 or 6 minutes later, just gone. Almost immediately after, Kevin's phone buzzed. Then my Garmin lit up. Everything just came back like normal. We both kind of laughed it off at first, like maybe it was solar interference or something. We checked our phones, time was correct, battery percentage hadn't changed, but there were some new photos in Kevin's gallery. He was the one who noticed. We were standing there looking at his phone, and he said, "I didn't take these." There were 8 photos, all time-stamped between 12:41 and 12:46, which matched the window when everything was off. The first few were just blurry shots of the sky, totally out of focus, angled weird, like the phone had been tilted upward but not pointed directly overhead. Then one showed Kevin. Kind of. His shoulder, part of his neck, like someone was taking a picture from behind him at a downward angle. Then there was a picture of the dirt, just dirt and a bit of my boot. Then one that showed us both, from a distance. It was a wide shot. We were standing maybe 15 feet apart, looking in opposite directions. Kevin was adjusting his backpack, and I had my hands on my hips. It looked like it had been taken from slightly above, like from a hill or something. But there was nothing like that nearby. There were no shadows from whoever or whatever took it. I checked my own phone and saw 3 new photos there too. They were less clear, but the last one was a shot of Kevin walking ahead of me. Only I don't remember that happening. The trail in the picture curved left through a narrow canyon. I swear we never went that way. We stood there going through our galleries trying to piece it together. The timestamps made sense, but the photos didn't. We weren't moving during that time. Neither of us had the phones out. Kevin got really quiet. He zoomed in on one of the sky shots. In the upper left corner, there was a small white smudge. At first, I thought it was lens flare, but it had shape to it. Not sharp, more like an oval, but vertical and just barely off-center. We tried to take pictures of the same patch of sky, hoping to match the angle or spot. Nothing lined up. We checked the metadata for the photos. Everything looked normal, except the GPS tags. They were blank. Every other photo from the trip had coordinates, even the ones taken earlier that morning. These ones just had empty fields where the location should have been. We didn't stay much longer after that. We started back the way we came and didn't talk for a while. Halfway back, I glanced down at my Garmin. It showed we were half a mile east of where we should have been, like we drifted. But the terrain looked the same. I stopped and tried to line up our trail on the map with the wash we'd walked along earlier. Something was off. The scrub patterns, the layout of the rocks, it looked close but not quite right. We eventually reached the car, and everything from that point on was normal. Phone worked, car started fine, no new photos. Later that night, Kevin called me. He said he tried uploading the weird photos to his laptop, but the files wouldn't transfer. They'd open on the phone, but not on the computer. He tried emailing one to me, but the attachment failed every time. Same thing when I tried. Even screenshots wouldn't send. The moment I attached one, the messaging app would crash. Eventually, we just gave up. The next weekend, we went back to the same trailhead. We hiked the same path, tried to find the exact spot where it happened. We couldn't. The ridge was there and the wash, but nothing looked exactly like it had. It felt like we'd taken a wrong turn somewhere. Only the GPS trail said we hadn't. The photos are still on my phone. I stopped trying to send them. Every once in a while, I look at that one of us standing apart with no one else in frame. I never remember standing like that. And I don't know who took it. I was flying a small single-engine Cessna that night, late July, somewhere over the outskirts of Oregon. The sky was clear, air smooth, and the heat from the day was still lingering in the cabin. I'd been up for a couple hours already, doing a routine night cross-country to keep my license current, flying VFR mostly. Just me and the plane. Nothing fancy. Around 11:15 p.m., I was cruising at about 5,500 feet westbound when I noticed something out the left window. At first, I thought it was another plane, maybe a twin engine or something, but the shape wasn't right. It was dark, almost completely black against the night sky, no navigation lights, no strobes, no sound. The kind of silence you notice when everything else, the engine, the wind, sounds normal, and this just doesn't make a peep. I shifted my gaze, trying to get a better look. The thing was maybe 300 yards away, flying alongside me, matching my speed perfectly. What really got me was the angle it was holding. It wasn't just flying beside me like a normal plane would. It tilted sharply, banked hard into turns that no regular aircraft should be able to do. Smooth and steady, almost like it was slipping through the air on its own terms. I glanced down at my instruments, triple-checking airspeed and altitude. No erratic readings, no turbulence, just my normal flight data. I looked back, and the shape was still there, still moving with me. I tried to radio it in. Cessna N8453P to unknown traffic. This is N8453P. Identify yourself. I hit the transmit button 3 times, but there was nothing on the other end. No call sign, no response, no static, just silence. And then, in the moment I was expecting something back, the thing disappeared. 1 second it was there, the next it wasn't. No fading, no flying off into the distance, just gone, like it never existed. That's when I really felt it. The quiet in the cockpit felt heavier, like the air was thicker. I double-checked the windows, the instruments, and even the fuel gauge. Everything was normal. My heart was beating faster than usual, but I kept it together. I radioed Portland Approach to report the sighting, but they told me no other traffic was showing on radar. No unidentified objects or blips. I gave them my position again and asked if they saw anything unusual on their scopes. They confirmed nothing, said I must have seen a private aircraft or something off radar. I tried to explain the weird angles and silence, but they just told me to stay safe and keep an eye out. The rest of the flight was quiet. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but nothing else showed up. When I finally landed, I filled out an incident report with the FAA. They didn't seem interested. Mostly gave me the usual line about optical illusions or atmospheric conditions. A few days later, I talked to some other pilots at the local flying club. One of them mentioned seeing something weird on his night flight months earlier, a dark shape that moved like nothing else. He said he didn't say anything because no one would believe him. Another pilot said he heard strange static on the radio during a night leg, but never saw anything. I never saw that thing again, but sometimes when I'm flying solo at night, I catch a glimpse out of the corner of my eye, something moving just at the edge of the lights, at impossible angles, always silent. And I can't help but wonder if it's still out there, watching. It started just after midnight. I'd been driving home from a late shift at the hospital, cruising through the outskirts of Cedar Falls, Iowa. The road was mostly empty, the trees lining the highway barely visible in the dim glow of my headlights. It was a cool, crisp autumn night, a little fog rolling in, making the edges of the road look soft and hazy. I remember that drive like it was normal, nothing unusual about it at first. I wasn't in a hurry, just wanted to get home, maybe catch some sleep before my early morning shift the next day. The sky was mostly clear, though with some clouds drifting low and the moon was hiding behind them. About halfway through the drive, I noticed something strange up ahead. At first I thought it was just the fog playing tricks, but the sky started lighting up with this weird swirling glow. Not lightning, not fireworks, more like colored bands of light shifting and twisting. Greens and blues, mostly, but they pulsed and flickered like they had their own rhythm. It wasn't like anything I'd ever seen before, and I'm out in the country enough to catch the northern lights or storms. This was different. It was quieter, too. No thunder, no crackling. I slowed down, pulled over onto the shoulder, and stepped out of my car. The cold air hit me, fog curling around my boots. I looked up, and the whole sky above me was dancing with that strange light. It felt almost hypnotic, like the air was thick with electricity, but I could barely hear anything except the faint rustling of the trees. I took out my phone to try and record it, but the screen was flickering, and the camera wouldn't focus right. After a few seconds, the lights started to fade, melting away like smoke, and the sky went dark again. Just the regular stars, a few of them faint through the fog. I shrugged it off, got back in my car and kept driving. I was thinking about calling my brother to tell him, but I didn't want to sound crazy. He'd probably say it was some drone show or airplane lights. When I pulled into my driveway about 20 minutes later, I parked and noticed something off right away. My windshield had something scratched into it, right across the driver's side. At first, I thought it was just a smear or dirt caught in the glass. But then I wiped it with my sleeve and saw the words clearly etched there, "Look up less." I rubbed my eyes, checked the windshield again. The message was definitely there. Fresh, like someone had used a key or something sharp to carve it in just minutes ago. That's when I realized the car wasn't alone. Parked down the street maybe 50 yards away was a black sedan. Nothing unusual about it at first glance, no markings, no headlights on, but the engine was running, humming softly in the quiet night. No one was inside. I stood on my porch staring at it for a while, trying to figure out if it was someone playing a prank or if maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. But the car stayed there, motionless, engine idling like it was waiting. I didn't want to go down and check it out, so I went inside and locked the door behind me. The next morning, I told a few neighbors about the weird light and the message on my windshield. No one else had seen anything, and nobody knew anything about the black car. The police said they'd keep an eye out, but didn't seem too concerned. Over the next few days, strange things kept happening. I'd catch glimpses of that black car parked down the street again, always with the engine running, but never with anyone inside. Sometimes it would be gone when I looked away for a moment, then reappear a block or two down the road. I started noticing odd sounds at night, low humming, like a transformer buzzing, but there was no equipment nearby. It was always faint and always seemed to be coming from the direction of the woods behind my house. One night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to a bright light flooding my bedroom window. It wasn't the usual street lamp or passing headlights. This light was steady, pure white, and it made the whole room glow like midday. I sat up, heart pounding, and looked outside, but the street was empty. The black car was gone, too. I got dressed and went outside to check. The fog was thicker now, hanging low around the trees, and the street was eerily silent. I walked down to where the black car had been, but there was no sign of it anywhere. The next morning, I found another message, this time scratched into the bark of the old maple tree in my front yard. Just 2 words, "Stop watching." I didn't tell anyone about the tree. I figured it was some kid messing around, but the handwriting looked almost the same as the windshield message, jagged but deliberate. That afternoon, I drove around the neighborhood to see if anyone else had seen something. A few neighbors said they'd noticed strange lights in the sky lately, but didn't know what to make of them. One guy said his dog had been acting weird, barking at nothing for hours. After that, I started feeling watched. Not like someone was hiding behind bushes or spying with binoculars. More like a presence I couldn't see, just out of the corner of my eye. I kept catching shadows in the street lamps that weren't mine, and sometimes when I looked out my kitchen window late at night, there'd be a faint glow behind the tree line. I stopped going outside after dark. One night, I thought I heard footsteps crunching in the leaves outside my back door. I peeked through the blinds and saw nothing but the empty yard. The wind had picked up, and the branches scratched against the window. I tried to call a friend, but got no answer. The next day, I found my phone's battery dead, even though I'd charged it fully the night before. The signal was weak, like I was in a dead zone, even though my house usually had full bars. The more I tried to make sense of it, the more disconnected everything felt. Time slipped weirdly, like some hours passed faster than others. Sometimes I'd glance at the clock and swear it had jumped ahead by 10 or 15 minutes. I thought about calling the police again, but didn't want to sound paranoid. A few nights later, I was sitting on my porch, smoking a cigarette, when the black car rolled slowly down the street. Headlights off, engine quiet. It stopped in front of my house and just sat there for a long minute. No one got out. I stared back, heart thumping, and the car finally pulled away, disappearing into the fog. After that, the messages stopped and the lights faded from the sky. The black car didn't show up again. I went back to normal routines, but sometimes when I'm driving home late or sitting alone outside, I feel that same quiet watching feeling creep back in. It's subtle, like a soft pressure on the back of my neck. I've checked my windshield and the tree. The scratches have all but faded. I don't know who or what left those messages, or why that car kept showing up. I don't know what the lights were or what it meant when they said, "Look up less." But something was there, something I still don't fully understand. I was never one for spooky stories or conspiracy theories, but what happened to me that October night near Fallon, Nevada, is something I still can't explain. It started out pretty ordinary. Me, a flashlight, and a decommissioned missile silo that's been closed for decades. I'm Jake, by the way, and I'm a bit of an urban explorer. Not the kind who breaks into places for thrills, but someone who's interested in abandoned sites with a little history. The silo was a few miles outside Fallon, tucked away in some scrubland. The place is fenced off, but not exactly sealed up tight. You could see inside the opening where the missile would have been stored, just a big concrete hole leading deep underground. I got there late afternoon, the sun low and orange, the air dry but chilly with a slight wind picking up. I parked my truck on a dirt road a few hundred yards away and started walking toward the entrance. It was quiet, the kind of silence that presses on your ears with only the crunch of my boots on the gravel. At first, everything seemed normal. The concrete walls had cracks and faded graffiti. I leaned over the edge, looking down into the dark shaft, which seemed bottomless from up there. I had my phone's flashlight, but it barely reached the first few feet. The air smelled stale and cool, like the place had been sealed for years. I pulled out a coil of rope and rigged a harness, just in case, planning to lower myself down a bit to get a better look inside. As I was getting ready, I thought I saw something flicker down in the shadows. A faint glow, almost like a light from a phone or a lantern. I froze for a second, but then figured it was probably a trick of the light or maybe a reflection from the fading sun. Nobody else was supposed to be there, and I didn't want to spook myself. Still, I kept looking down, waiting. Once I was rigged up, I lowered myself about 20 feet down into the shaft. The walls were damp, and the smell was stronger, musty, like old metal and earth. The glow I'd seen earlier wasn't there anymore, but the flashlight caught something else, a series of lights flickering along the far side of the shaft, deeper down. They weren't steady like lanterns, more like pulsating, irregular, blue and white, mostly. I tried calling out, but my voice echoed weirdly, bouncing off the concrete, and there was no answer. I wasn't expecting one, but it felt strange to be that close to something unknown and get silence back. I climbed back up, my heart rate speeding up for reasons I couldn't explain. The wind had picked up more, and the sky was turning dark. I looked around but saw no sign of anyone else. No footprints, no vehicles, no lights. When I got back to my truck, I noticed my phone signal was gone. That wasn't unusual in remote spots, but what freaked me out was the radio. It was dead too. No static, no buzz, just silence when I flipped it on. I drove back toward town, the headlights cutting through the darkness. On the two-lane road, the only other light was from the stars and a faint glow on the horizon, probably from Fallon. About halfway home, my truck's dashboard started flickering, the gauges acting weird for a second. The radio suddenly came on, not music or talk, but a low, constant hum like electrical interference. It was faint and then cut out before I could mess with the knobs. When I finally got home, the weirdness didn't stop. My apartment was the usual cluttered mess. Clothes on the floor, books stacked on the table, nothing out of place. But my mailbox had something new. A single photograph. No envelope, no markings except for a short note on the back in messy handwriting. It said, "We're not buried that deep." I flipped the photo over and stared. It was a grainy black and white shot taken from above. I recognized the spot instantly, the silo, seen from the air at night. And in the picture, standing at the edge of the silo's opening, was me. My silhouette, hands resting on the concrete rim, looking down. No idea how someone could have gotten that photo, or who sent it. I live alone on the second floor of an apartment building with no windows facing that direction. The place is locked up tight, and no one has keys but me and the landlord, who I barely know. After that night, I kept trying to figure out if I'd imagined the lights or if someone had been down in the silo with me. I went back during the day, alone and with friends, but saw nothing unusual. No lights, no sounds, no footprints or evidence anyone else had been there. The area was quiet, too quiet, almost. A week later, I was driving by the silo again at dusk when my truck's radio went dead once more. The sky was clear, the sunset fading, and that same hum started low and steady. I turned off the engine and stepped outside. The air felt heavy, and the cicadas that usually filled the evening were silent. Then, from just beyond the tree line, I saw the faintest glow again. Not moving fast, just hovering low, flickering between blue and white, like before. It wasn't a helicopter or plane. It didn't have any wings or sound. I wanted to call out, but the words stuck in my throat. After a few minutes, the light dimmed and vanished into the night like it was never there. I went home and locked every door, triple-checked the windows, and didn't sleep well for days. Since then, the weird things haven't stopped completely. The lights sometimes flicker on my porch at night when no one's there. My phone glitches out. Pictures I didn't take show up in the gallery, just static and shapes that don't make sense. I don't know who or what that photo on my doorstep, or why they would watch me from above the silo. I'm not sure if I want to find out. The clearing was silent except for the faint hum of cicadas and the rustle of dry leaves. I'd been out there since dawn, walking the perimeter, taking notes on the bear activity around this part of the forest. It was late September in northern Minnesota, and the air had that crisp edge that meant fall was creeping in but hadn't quite settled yet. I was used to the quiet, but that morning felt different, like something had shifted. I was about to pack up and head back to the research station when I noticed something strange in the clearing. A series of perfectly round scorch marks in the dirt, arranged in an odd pattern. They were about 2 feet across each, maybe 6 or 7 of them in a rough circle about 15 feet in diameter. The marks were deeply embedded in the earth, the soil beneath blackened and cracked, but oddly no trees or plants seemed to have been affected around the edges. No branches snapped, no leaves burned, just those scorch marks, clean and symmetrical, like someone had pressed a giant hot cookie cutter into the ground. I stared at them for a while, trying to figure out if it was some kind of natural phenomenon, but it didn't make sense. Nothing I'd ever read about or seen in the field matched those marks. I circled them slowly, checking for tracks or anything else. No footprints, no tire marks, no signs of campfire or human activity. Just the scorched earth. I took photos, made sketches, and took samples of the soil. I flagged the location on my GPS and radioed back to the station with a brief description. The team thought it might be some kind of lightning strike or an animal marking territory, but the shape and symmetry didn't fit. The forest that day was quiet, too quiet, and I felt like I was being watched. I kept looking over my shoulder, but there was nothing there. A few days later, just after lunch, there was a knock on the station's door. It was one of those old research cabins, nothing fancy. Wood walls, a small kitchen, a single room where I did my work. I wasn't expecting visitors, so I opened the door cautiously. A man was standing there, tall, wearing a plain black suit that looked out of place in the middle of the woods. No badge, no name tag, nothing identifying him. His eyes were dark and steady, and when he spoke, his voice was flat but calm. "I'm interested in patterns in non-human behavior," he said. That was it. No small talk, no introduction, just that line. I blinked, trying to place him, but he hadn't mentioned any agency or reason for being there. I told him about the scorch marks, showed him the photos on my camera. He looked at them closely but didn't react much. Then he asked detailed questions about my work, the animals I tracked, the data I collected, stuff that seemed oddly specific but not threatening. I found myself getting nervous, the way he moved, how his gaze didn't waver, like he was analyzing every word, every reaction. He didn't ask for directions or how to get to the clearing, but somehow he knew exactly where it was. I offered to take him there, partly because I wanted to get him out of the cabin and partly to see if he'd reveal anything. He declined politely, saying he had his own methods. He stayed for almost an hour, then left without another word. I watched him walk away through the trees, his steps almost too quiet for the soft forest floor. After he left, I double-checked my equipment, my locks, everything. Nothing was missing. but the feeling that something wasn't right lingered. In the days that followed, the scorch marks kept showing up in my mind. The silence of that clearing, the man's unnerving calm, the way he seemed to know things without asking. I kept going back to the clearing when I could, always looking for changes, new marks, anything unusual, but nothing ever appeared again. Still, some nights, when the wind rustled the trees just right, I swear I can hear a low hum, not like any animal or machine I know, just a faint vibration under the skin of the forest. I never saw the man again. No calls, no messages, just that one visit and a feeling that whatever was out there wasn't interested in me, but it was watching. I was out on patrol just before midnight, making my usual rounds through the northern section of Pine Ridge National Forest. It was early October, and the air had that sharp, almost brittle cold you get when fall's settling in, but winter's still a ways off. The moon was behind some thin clouds, so the forest was darker than usual, but the night was quiet, no wind to speak of. I'd been working as a park ranger for 6 years, so nights alone out here weren't anything new. I was used to the sounds, the rustling of leaves, an owl hooting, the distant snap of branches from deer or something else moving around. But that night was different. I was walking along a narrow dirt trail near one of the old fire lookouts. I'd stopped for a moment, checking my radio for updates, when I heard it, this sharp, cracking sound. It wasn't a gunshot or a tree branch breaking underfoot, more like a thunderclap, but closer, and somehow wrong. It echoed, but then everything just went completely silent. No birds, no insects, nothing. I froze. The silence felt heavy, unnatural. I looked around, my ears straining. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Then I glanced up. Above the tree line, maybe 50 feet off the ground, there was something. It was hard to say exactly what, because it was only there for a second, maybe 2 at most, but it was definitely some kind of metallic shape. It wasn't like a helicopter or a drone. It had clean edges, smooth surfaces that caught what little moonlight there was and reflected it in sharp lines. It wasn't round or oval. It looked almost flat, like a thin panel hovering horizontally. I'm not sure how to explain the way it moved. It wasn't like something falling or gliding slowly. It just appeared there, hung for a moment, and then vanished straight up. No noise, no whirring engines, no rotor blades, just gone. After it disappeared, the normal sounds of the forest came back all at once. The birds started chirping. A squirrel chattered somewhere nearby. It was like the silence was peeled away all at once. My heart was pounding, but I didn't run. I stood there for a long time, trying to figure out what I'd just seen. I pulled out my radio to call dispatch, but the channel was dead. No static, no signal at all, just dead silence. I tried again, but nothing. I decided to head back to the ranger station, which was about 3 miles away. On the way, I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see something, anything, but the trail was empty. The forest looked the same as always. When I finally got back to the station, I checked the security cameras mounted outside. Nothing unusual. No lights, no shapes, no flashes. The forest looked perfectly normal. The next morning, I talked to the other rangers. Nobody else had heard the crack or seen anything odd that night. The radio channels were working fine for everyone else. For days afterward, I found myself watching the treetops whenever I was outside. I'd catch myself scanning the sky, hoping for some explanation, but there was nothing. Sometimes I think about how quiet everything got right after that crack, like the forest itself was waiting for something, and then it let out a breath when the thing disappeared. I don't know what it was. I just know it wasn't anything I've ever seen or heard of in all my time out here. I was driving home late that night, somewhere on Highway 89 between Lake Tahoe and Truckee. It was one of those cold, clear November evenings, the kind where your breath fogs up the windows even if the heater's on full blast. The road was mostly empty, just me and the dark trees lining both sides, shadows stretching out like fingers. I was tired but didn't want to stop. The sooner I got home, the better. Then, just as I was passing the little turnout near Donner Summit, I saw her, a woman standing by the shoulder, thumb out. She looked soaked through, wearing a soaked jacket and shivering. I almost didn't stop. This stretch is known for sketchy stuff, and I usually avoid picking up strangers, but something about her made me slow down. Maybe it was the way she looked at me, like she really needed help. I pulled over, cracked the window. "Need a ride?" She nodded quickly, getting in without much fuss. "Thank you," she said, her voice low but steady. Her name was Lisa. She didn't say much at first, just stared out the window while I drove. I glanced over a few times. She had those wide, pale eyes like she hadn't slept in days. There was a faint scent I couldn't place, almost like cold metal mixed with something sweet, but I figured it was just the wet clothes or the car. We drove in silence for a while. The heater hummed, and the tires crunched on the gravel shoulder when I adjusted speed. After about 10 minutes, I glanced at the rearview mirror, but she wasn't there. I turned my head. The back seat was empty. I froze, hand gripping the steering wheel harder than I realized. The door was still locked. The light inside the car was dim, but I could see every corner clearly. No sign she'd gotten out. The seatbelt buckle hung idle. The wet jacket she'd thrown on the seat was gone. I blinked, checked again. Nothing, but the smell was still there. That metallic scent, like a faint electric charge mixed with cold iron, lingering in the air where she'd been. I pulled over to the side, heart pounding, looked back at the empty road, the dense trees on both sides, nothing but silence and the occasional distant hoot of an owl. I called out, "Lisa?" My voice cracked. No answer. I unlocked the doors, got out, and circled the car, shining my flashlight down the shoulder. Nothing. No footprints, no jacket, no sign she'd walked away. I got back in, locked the doors, and stared out into the black forest. The air felt thicker, heavier, like something was watching just beyond the tree line. I wanted to call the cops, but didn't know what to say. Picked up a hitchhiker who disappeared into thin air. They'd think I was nuts. I started the car again, hands still shaking. As I pulled back onto the highway, the metallic smell grew stronger for a moment, then faded as quickly as it had come. For the rest of the drive home, I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see her sitting there, but the back seat stayed empty. I pulled into my driveway at about 1:30 a.m. The house was dark and quiet. I shut off the engine and sat for a minute, trying to process what just happened. I kept smelling that strange, metallic scent in the car, even after I turned off the heater and opened the windows. It was faint, but definitely there. I grabbed a cloth and wiped down the back seat, but it wouldn't go away. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no messages. The next morning I told my sister about it. She just looked at me like I'd lost it, said maybe I was overtired or the stress was getting to me. But I kept thinking about the way Lisa looked, how scared she seemed, like she wasn't just stranded, but running from something. And the smell, that smell. Days later, I found a small patch of wetness on the floor where her feet might have rested. I cleaned it up, but no matter what I did, the metallic scent never completely left the car. Sometimes at night, I swear I can still catch it, faint and cold, like a warning or a reminder. I don't know who Lisa was or where she went, but I'm pretty sure she wasn't just a hitchhiker. I started hiking that morning just before sunrise. It was early May and the air was crisp, maybe a bit too cold for just a long-sleeve shirt. I figured I'd warm up once I got moving. The trailhead was tucked away in the Cascades, not too far from where I grew up, but remote enough that you wouldn't expect many people. That was exactly why I picked it. The plan was simple: hike in, spend some hours alone, then come back before dark. I wasn't carrying a lot. Just a small pack with water, a granola bar, my phone, and a map. I usually didn't bother with the map since I'd been on this trail a couple times, but this time I wanted to be sure. I didn't get far before the woods closed in around me, and the sounds of the road disappeared behind. For the first hour, everything was normal. Birds chirping, the crunch of pine needles underfoot, the occasional squirrel darting away. The trail was narrow, but clear. The trees leaned in, mostly fire and cedar, their branches thick with needles. I stopped once or twice to catch my breath and snap pictures of wildflowers. The sun rose higher, sending pale shafts of light through the canopy. Then I noticed something. I was near a bend in the trail where a large cedar had fallen across the path a few years back. Usually there was a clear way around it, a dirt detour people had worn down. But that morning, it wasn't like that. The branches that blocked the path looked rearranged, like someone had taken them and twisted or broken them in a deliberate pattern, not random damage from weather or animals. The branches formed shapes I couldn't place, jagged lines and angles that felt unnatural. I crouched down, running my fingers over a broken twig. It was fresh. The sap still sticky, but no footprints around, no sign of anyone else coming through recently. Just the smell of pine and moss. That's when I got the first uneasy feeling. Not fear exactly, more like confusion. Like the woods were different than they were supposed to be. I glanced behind me. The forest looked wrong, not just the branches or the broken twigs. The whole scene was off. Trees I'd seen clearly when I passed that way earlier, big old cedars leaning left, were gone. In their place, younger trees grew oddly spaced, their trunks bent and twisted at impossible angles. The moss on the rocks was different, more green, wetter, like it belonged in a rainforest, not this part of the Cascades. I blinked hard, thinking maybe it was light playing tricks. I shook my head, trying to clear the fogginess in my mind. I took a step back, trying to retrace where I'd come from. The trail was gone. Not just hidden or overgrown, it was like it never existed. I turned fully around, scanning the area, heart starting to beat faster, but still steady. I tried calling out, hello, but the woods swallowed my voice. I reached for my phone. No signal, not even a flicker. I pulled out the map and tried to line up landmarks, but nothing matched. The trees I knew, the rock formations, the slope of the hill, all wrong. It was like I was somewhere else entirely, inside a forest that looked like mine, but wasn't. I walked in the direction I thought was back, but after 10 minutes, I saw the same patterns of broken branches and twisted trees again. No trail, no sign of human passage. It started to feel like the forest itself was watching me, or maybe guiding me somewhere I didn't want to go. I stopped, took a deep breath. Then I heard it. A faint humming, low and steady, coming from deeper in the woods. Not natural, but not mechanical either. More like a vibration in the air. I thought about turning around, but didn't know which way that was anymore. The humming grew louder, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. Then I noticed the light. It wasn't the sun. It was a pale white glow hovering behind a cluster of trees up ahead. No flames, no flicker, just steady, unnatural light. Something made me move toward it, but my feet felt heavy, like I was sinking into the soil. The branches around me began to feel sticky, like cobwebs catching on my jacket. The closer I got, the colder the air became, even though the sun was shining above the canopy. My breath was visible, thin clouds in the middle of the morning. The light was so bright now I had to squint. It hovered maybe 10 feet off the ground. The shape was vague, like a cloud of mist that held a form, an oval, almost egg-shaped, but shimmering and shifting. I reached out, almost touching it, and then everything went silent. No birds, no wind, no humming. The light blinked off. The forest snapped back into normal. The trail was there. I was standing exactly where I'd been hours before, the cedar tree fallen across the path just as I remembered it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I checked, full signal. I walked out without looking back, heart pounding but face dry. When I got home, Katie asked if I had fun. I told her, yeah. That night, I checked my phone. The battery was low, even though I'd charged it before I left. And there was a new photo in my gallery. Not one I'd taken. It was that light. The pale, shifting shape hovering just above the ground. I don't know how it got there. I don't know why I still have it. I haven't gone back. The forest looks normal from the road, but sometimes when the wind shifts just right, I swear I hear that humming again. I was out behind the house around midnight, same as most clear nights that year. I'd gotten into amateur astronomy pretty heavy after I moved out to Green Springs. Not much to do out there besides stargaze and fix things that shouldn't be broken yet. The skies were some of the darkest in the state. No light pollution, just endless stars. It's the one thing I liked about that place. I'd set up the Dobsonian on the back deck, pointed south. I was doing some casual observation, nothing too technical, just scanning Cygnus for double stars, messing around. I remember it was one of those rare nights where the air was perfectly still, no wind at all. Even the pine trees on the ridge line weren't moving. The crickets had gone quiet, which I only noticed later. I was leaning over the scope with my red flashlight clipped to my hoodie when I noticed something was off. Not in the eyepiece, just with the stars themselves. A patch of sky near Deneb looked wrong. At first I thought maybe there was a low cloud or some high altitude haze, but the weather had been bone dry all week. The stars in that area weren't dim, they were just gone, like someone had taken an eraser to that part of the sky. It wasn't shaped like a cloud either, it was too clean. A long, horizontal oval, blacker than black, not shimmering or glowing, just solid, like a cutout. It was moving slow, left to right across the sky. I remember blinking a few times to make sure it wasn't my vision. It moved silently, steady as anything. No lights, no trail, just this shape blotting out the densest part of the Milky Way like it didn't belong there. I stepped away from the scope and stood at the edge of the deck to get a better view with the naked eye. Whatever it was, it didn't reflect anything, not starlight, not ambient light from the horizon. It was like looking at a hole in space. I watched it for maybe 30 seconds before I realized I was holding my breath. It felt wrong, somehow. Not scary, exactly. More like a pressure in my chest, like my body wanted to freeze up even though nothing was happening. Then the shape paused. Mid-glide, it just stopped. That's when I noticed how quiet everything was. No insects, no rustling, no distant barking from the houses down the slope. Just this blanket of silence and the weird hum in my ears, like I'd stood up too fast. The blackout shape hovered there for another 10 seconds or so, then shifted. Not forward, down. The way it moved wasn't right. It didn't descend like a plane or a balloon. It just repositioned, instantly, but not abruptly. Like the space it was in changed, not the object itself. That's the only way I can describe it. It stayed low for maybe 5 more seconds, then started gliding again, but this time toward me, slowly, still silent. No wind, no displacement. I remember backing up until I was standing inside the doorframe of the kitchen, still staring at it through the screen. I could see it moving above the ridge, blotting out more stars as it passed. Big. Maybe football field size, but it was hard to tell with no lights or structure to go by. Just a moving shadow. Maisie, my neighbor's dog, started barking 2 houses over. Then she went quiet mid-bark. Not like she stopped, like something cut her off. The power went out a few seconds after that. I heard the fridge click off behind me and the porch light died. I was in complete darkness except for the stars. I remember stepping out again slowly, eyes adjusted now, and the thing was right above me. No lights. No detail. Just a void blotting out half the sky. It wasn't directly overhead, off to the right, maybe 100 feet up, lower than any plane had business being. Still no sound, still no wind. I stood there, frozen, for what felt like a full minute. Then it moved again. Same weird way. Not flying, just changing position. It shifted back toward the ridge and rose higher, gaining altitude in a straight vertical line, like it was done. I watched it until it disappeared into the stars again, just blended back into the sky like it had never been there. A few seconds later, the porch light flicked back on. The fridge hummed. Crickets started chirping again, all at once. I stood there another few minutes, then locked everything up and went to bed without brushing my teeth. Next morning, I checked the local weather logs to see if maybe a weird cloud formation could explain it. Nothing. Skies had been clear all night. I even pulled the footage from my trail camera, but it only caught static between 12:02 and 12:11 a.m. I didn't go out again for a week. When I finally did, I couldn't bring myself to look up. I drove past Groom Lake in late March. I wasn't trying to see anything. I'd flown into Vegas for a job interview, and instead of heading straight back to Sacramento, I decided to take the long way home through Tonopah just to get off the interstate. I like weird places, I guess. Not in the conspiracy kind of way, just the quiet, middle-of-nowhere vibe. I had a dash cam running the whole trip. One of those cheap ones from Walmart, records in 5-minute loops that saves everything to a 64 gigabyte card. I bought it mostly for insurance purposes, never had a reason to really look at the footage before. Anyway, the part that matters was late afternoon. Maybe 5:30 p.m. sun was low, but not gone. I was heading south on 375, what they call the extraterrestrial highway. I'd stopped for gas and snacks at that tiny store in Rachel, then kept driving. Not much out there, just long stretches of open desert, low ridges, barbed wire, and the occasional faded warning sign. There was this one spot, maybe 20 minutes past the turnoff, where the road gets close to the perimeter. Not close enough to get in trouble, but close enough you can see the white pickup trucks sitting on the hilltops, just watching. I slowed down a little there just to look. You always hear about the camo dudes, and I figured, why not? I had time. Nothing happened. I didn't stop. Didn't get out. Just rolled by slow, maybe 30 miles an hour. I remember glancing at the hills, thinking I saw a flash of light from a windshield or maybe binoculars. It was gone fast. I kept going. Got to Tonopah around 8, got a burger, checked into a motel. That night, I plugged the dash cam into my laptop just to see if I'd caught any of those trucks in the footage. Just curious. That's when I noticed the gap. There's a 5-minute clip, timestamped 5:24 p.m., where the video looks normal. Sky's kind of golden, the desert's all flat and tan, a couple power poles passing by. Then the next clip starts at 5:29 p.m., but something's wrong. The whole screen is black for the first 14 seconds. Not fuzzy, not corrupted, just pitch black, like the lens was covered. No audio either. Then, out of nowhere, the video cuts back in like nothing happened. Road, desert, same angle, same speed. I watched it 5 times, trying to figure it out. The transition was clean. No digital noise, no jump, just 14 seconds of solid black. Everything else on the card was fine. Every other clip had clean starts and stops with audio. This was the only one with a blackout. I figured maybe the camera glitched, but it didn't skip. The timestamp didn't jump ahead, it ticked through every second, from 5:29 to 5:29:14, then the video came back like normal. The camera thought it was recording the whole time. That bothered me. A glitch would skip, right? Or freeze. But this wasn't a skip, it was just black. I thought maybe it was the sun. Maybe I passed into a shadow or something. But I pulled up the GPS in satellite view, and that stretch of 375 has no overpasses, no tunnels, no tall trees, nothing. Just open sky and low scrubland. The weirdest part was that the scenery didn't change at all between the last frame before the black and the first frame after. Same power pole in the distance. Same curve in the road, like the world stopped moving for those 14 seconds. That bugged me more than anything. I went back and watched the footage from the clip before and after, just in case. In the 5-minute segment before, I noticed something subtle I hadn't caught the first time. Around 5:26, the sunlight changes for a second. Everything gets slightly dimmer, like someone turned down the brightness. Then it fades back in. It's quick. I only noticed because the shadows on the dash shifted, even though the road didn't. In the segment after the blackout at 5:30, the camera picks up this low sound, hard to describe, like a subwoofer hum just at the edge of hearing. It lasts maybe 3 seconds, then fades. I didn't hear it at the time, or if I did, I don't remember. I drove that whole stretch in one go. Never stopped. The odometer didn't show anything weird. I checked the trip log I'd been keeping. Distance matched the map. But I kept thinking about that blackout. Next morning, still in Tonopah, I drove back up the highway. I stopped at the exact stretch where the blackout happened, using the GPS coordinates from the footage. There was nothing there. No marks on the road, no tire tracks, no poles or wires or buildings. Just open dirt on either side, some scrub brush, and a fence way off in the distance. I left the dash cam running again, drove the same direction, same speed, watched the footage that night. No blackout this time. Everything recorded clean. But while scrubbing through, I saw something else I didn't expect. In the same clip, the one recorded that second day, right at 5:29 again, there's a flash frame, like a single frame, not even a second long. It's not black, it's white. Bright white. Too fast to notice unless you pause it just right. Everything goes overexposed, like someone turned on a floodlight right in front of the lens. Then it's gone. I slowed the video down. Frame by frame, there's no shape, no source, just pure white across the entire screen. Then it cuts back to normal. It doesn't happen in any other part of the trip. I stopped using the dash cam after that. I still have it, and the footage is all backed up on a drive. Every once in a while, I think about showing it to someone, maybe posting it online, but I always decide not to. There's nothing to explain. Just a clean 14-second blackout in the middle of nowhere. then a flash the next day in the exact same place.